Hey everybody, welcome to Neural Networks Genuine Conversation. I'm Anthony Cook, your host. The powder that is race continues here in America and across the world as we continue to see protests, quote unquote riots, worldwide, not just here in our home in America. Why does society place so much emphasis on this thing called race? Right, we're going to talk about that today. And what is our intimate attachment to it? Why are we so obsessive over it? All right, I'd like to welcome my panel today. Sandra, if you'd be so kind to start it off.
Hi, I'm Sandra Aguilar. I have a background, BA in International Studies with a concentration in Latin America, so I have a little bit of a background in kind of how the way that race is now modernly classified trickled its way over to the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you, Sandra. Ethan?
I'm Ethan Fuqua. I have a background in biopsychology. I work currently as an organ recovery specialist.
Beautiful. Shadrach?
My name is Shad Ruffin. My actual educational background is in art, but somehow I got into marketing. Been doing that for a lot of years, and now I work for a large media company in Los Angeles doing marketing for them.
And what your title is?
Senior Manager of CRM.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Eric?
My name is Eric Brown. I work as a Senior Veteran Outreach and Recruitment Advisor for a college here in Los Angeles. I have a background working with veterans. I served in the military, OIF and OEF, and I'm just happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Britt?
My name is Britt Smith. I am a high school intervention specialist, grades 10 through 12, also the head football coach at our school. My undergrad is in history, and I have a minor in business, and my graduate degree is in special education.
Awesome. Beautiful. So the first topic I want to kind of jump into today is race, right? And its creation. And I was doing a little research, and I was seeing that in Spain in the 1400s, there was kind of a creation of laws, the first documented laws where race was being basically catalyzed and used to segregate people. And Sandra did also some research on that. A lot of the laws originally were formulated to focus on people of Jewish faith and race. I was reading that they were basically setting up these laws to where they could break into these people's homes whenever they wanted and just take all of their shit, basically. And we kind of see that it was used for not the best purposes, obviously. But I want to kind of open a discussion about that now.
Well, I can give you a little background as to the article that you had sent. So there was a gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Gorski who wrote this great article that Anthony sent called How Racism Was First Officially Codified in the 15th Century in Spain. So what we're looking at is a community that had a pretty diverse, at the time Spain was fairly diverse. You had a really large Jewish community, had a really large Arab community known as the Moors. Mm-hmm. There was what was called Christian negrophobic racism. Now, these are Jeffrey's words, not mine. I do want to be very specific. I want to cite each author and their work. They are the experts in this. So there was a gentleman, an archdeacon by the name of Fernan Martinez, who is known as the prime motivator for violence towards Jews specifically. So at the time, a third to half of the Spanish Jews, the largest community in Europe at the time, were converted to Christianity. It was a mass conversion. It was done in a way that basically created animosity between old Christians versus new Christians. And so a lot of the laws were in place where you had to prove with 4 generations, you had to prove
that's right.
I am 4th generation or more new Christian in order to have something as simple as being able to have land, hold public and private office. So there was resistance. There was certainly resistance towards this. And we can talk about a gentleman by the name of Loyola. So give me just one moment here.
Which set of colleges here in the United States named after him?
Yeah. So his name was Ignacio de Loyola, which is the founder of Jesuit, which is order of priests.
Mhm.
But at the time, what was happening in Spain is they set aside something called Sentencia Estatuto, which barred converts, or again, the new Christians from, again, holding those public offices and private offices, receiving land. They had to prove how many generations they were. It was known as the first example in history of legalized racism. Now that's from Leon Poliakov, which is an anti-Semitism expert. So the restrictions, and discrimination were based on racial rather than religious definition of Judaism. So it banned them completely, even from marrying in certain areas. It exiled them. Even in universities, they were barred from them. And by the early 16th century, cathedrals, they began to just bar them from church offices. So that's where we have this kind of battle between Loyola versus Juan Martinez. And I may be mispronouncing, I apologize, but Silicio. Silicio was the big proponent for what's called limpieza. Limpieza is a Spanish word for cleaning. So cleaning the race, getting rid of anything that wasn't Spaniard, Castilian. And of course, his opponent, Loyola. It unfortunately ended up trickling the idea of cleansing the race. If you've ever heard of the 1-drop rule, that ended up in the Americas. If you have one,
you're right. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, though, what was it? 1/8 rule.
16.
I was
1/8. Yeah, 1/8. 18th.
16.
1/16. That's right. It was 1/16 rule.
So so basically what ends up happening in kind of a nutshell, again, I'm no expert on this one, but just from the general research that I've done and that I've had in my past studies, it does end up trickling through the Americas. And now we have classifications of race. We have what's known, words I'm sure you've heard, like mulatto, words like mestizo, that now are classifying basically people who are half white with something else. And I have here that this is a historian called Alden Bond notes that because the Latin American model of life, we had that as a lifetime, the inheritable servitude was apparent to everyone. So the Spanish and the Portuguese colonists held 250,000 Black slaves by 1617. So Virginians had no need to invent a new status of race. We had already invented that for them.
Copy paste, right?
Basically a kind of a copy and paste. Now you can easily point the finger at Spain and say this is your problem, but I kind of doing a little more research, I find this really great article called "Did Race and Racism Exist in the Middle Ages?" And now we're looking at a situation where we have medieval England as the first racial state in the history of the West, and I have here, and again, I want to be able to cite this correctly.
I'm going to put this below too when I post this.
Oh, thank you.
Those articles, so I'm
perfect,
gonna have those all for anybody that's watching to read those and research further.
Please. So this is Geraldine Heng, who basically had said that the church and state laws produce surveillance, tagging, herding, incarceration, legal murder, expulsion. There was even a popular story of Jews killing Christian boys evolved over the centuries, showing how changes in popular culture helped create the emerging communal identity.
It was a narrative created, by the way, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, but these are her words, that showing how changes in popular culture helped create the emerging communal identity of England. So basically, it's seeing the ascension of what is a superiority according to them.
Right, but it's also creating a narrative based in fear, right?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't based in any fact. This is just this is just a means of controlling a narrative, of maintaining a certain position. and unfortunately having a scapegoat. It was all fear. But that's essentially a little bit of the research that I had done.
Oh, and the tax revolt in Toledo. Did you want to speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
We can absolutely speak about that. So going back to Spain, we can certainly talk about how it actually started in a political way. So there was a gentleman by the name of Álvaro de Luna, which was a favorite of the king at the time, who demanded a loan of about 1 million maravedis, and the townspeople in Toledo originally resisted. So now we have an official by the name of Pedro Sarmiento, who joined the rebellion as a means of getting rid of Luna. But really it was a way of targeting those new converts, those Jewish
Mhm.
people who were forced to convert. So again, all political, but in order to justify what you had explained of basically the looting of their home, they had to claim that they were secretly still practicing Judaism, and that in some way or another they were scheming against the Catholic Church.
Right.
So that created that animosity.
Mhm. It was just another excuse just to basically legally do whatever they want.
Essentially, yes.
Mhm.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah. So I want to kind of talk about the parallels from then into now, and kind of open that discussion to you all. What parallels do you see from early America to now with, a lot of those, again, race rules and laws created in Europe?
Lots of lots of justifications. Forget where I heard it, but like historically, people would try to paint a group or a segment of people as, some sort of inhuman, like they're rapists and murderers, just classify them as animals as justification for treating them a certain way on a broader scope, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see it like it's all over my Facebook feed with the Black Lives Matter. You always get the All Lives Matter people. That's a given. But then you also always get the people that are like, well, if Black Lives Matter, how come no one's doing anything about black on black violence? And that's just a justification.
That's something I want to get to a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's simply a justification. You're like, okay, your people are acting like animals, and so the cops are treating them like animals. But there's more to it than that. Like, it's common sense that there are organizations that are working within these cities, in these communities, that are trying to do things that curb, inner city violence. Like, I was personally a part of Good City Mentors, which goes into schools with troubled kids. Like, they put them into these schools when they are kicked out or suspended or expelled from another school. They put them into these schools, and then this program with these mentors comes in, and we actually mentor these children and help them to turn their lives around before they get in real trouble.
Mm.
And though that's not directly affiliated with like Black Lives Matter or any of these other organizations, that is effective work that's going on inside of the community that doesn't get any play.
It needs to get more play.
It needs to get more play. And there are mentorship organizations everywhere, but they're all smaller groups doing their own thing within the community. So in the larger conversation, it just really doesn't get brought up. And if it's not on the world stage, people are going to keep using this excuse as if to say that nothing is going on in these communities that's trying to help these kids. It's trying to stop the violence. And it's just infuriating because they keep using it as a justification, and it's not a real justification because they don't do their research. They're just parroting whatever other people say.
Exactly. Right. And we see that more and more often, right? We don't see people with actual thought, right? Where they've done the research, where they've done the reading, where they've really gone out of their way. I mean, we see that in our leadership as well, where it's just watch.
Yep.
And again, it shows how susceptible we are to media. It shows how easily we're formed into whatever model the people that are in charge of those conglomerates, want you to think. So again, getting back to the United Corporations of America.
That's accurate.
I think like I think, you know, when we're talking about race and about the creation of race and the codifying of different types of people, we have to like go all the way back and think about, you know, evolved human psychology. Human beings are naturally xenophobic. You know, we fear the other, the outside group, because, you know, they could be trying to take what we have, right? So that really worked really well for us 100,000 years ago when we were still, you know, derping about on the grasslands, right?
Right. Nomads.
You didn't know when you were going to see your next meal. You didn't know, you know, if a group that you came across was going to try to, you know, harm you or your children. So, that kind of mindset worked back then, and it was important. But in today's world, it's no longer valid.
Right.
You know, we've moved beyond those concerns. But I think it's interesting that you can see, like, we talked about last week, we talked about race as being a social construct, and it 100% has no biological relevance. Like, I mean,
and that's why I wanted to go back to the history of it, of when it was created and why it was created.
Right. So, I mean, like, it has no biological correlate, but I think that if you look at it in terms of economics, you can kind of see how, like, in Spain in the 15th century, the Catholic Church was, you know, the thing. You know, it's the big dog in the yard, and they had to do something. You know, with having that power, you have to always kind of be, once you have that kind of power, you're kind of paranoid, maybe, of how you're going to keep that power and how you can make sure that no one else has any access to it, and maybe even how you can even gain even more power.
Right.
Because you have to think, like, you know, the church at that time was huge, and it had huge influence all throughout the world. You know, at least what we traditionally call the Western world.
The Levantine.
Yeah. So you know, it made, you know, looking back at our xenophobic brains, you know, our smaller 100,000-year-old brains, right? We could see how they would be like, well, you know, we need to make some distinctions so that, you know, those people that are a little bit different from us, that do think they, you know, they pray to the same God, but it's different. Like, so they're different. So they could probably be bad. They could be a risk. So we can't risk, like, them intermingling with us and possibly getting some of this power to take away. We have to protect our interests here. We have to protect our grains, you know, our whatever, our meat, our kill, whatever. And I think that if you move forward into America, it's the same way. It's always been, at the end of the day, I think it's always been an economic concern, you know, that because we talked about this last week. After the Civil War, the populists were trying to unite poor whites and black people, recently freed slaves, to kind of topple over what was becoming just a gigantic, like, bloated, what is now something that's too big to fail and too big. It's so large, the establishment that, you know, of powerful people that have a lot of concentrated wealth. Populists were trying to, you know, bring together poor whites and recently freed slaves and saying, look, you know, if we all work together, we can have this, we can topple this thing, we can make this not a thing anymore. You know, there's enough for everybody to have all that they need, but we have to topple down this thing first. And they couldn't do that. So that's when you saw a lot of concentrated effort to, you know, obviously, you know, enslaving people is one thing, and that goes back even further. But it's always been, I think, at its core, this power struggle where there's, you know, a group that has a lot to lose, and they have to figure out, how can we divide people? How can we get people to not think that they're the same as each other? And the easiest way to do it is by, well, I mean, that person looks different from you, so they are different, and they're bad because of it. And so, you know, you need to not necessarily, don't mix with those people. You know, you don't want to have children with them. You don't want to be friends with them even, you know, because they're evil people, right? I mean, that's where I see it coming from. I see it as like,
protecting interest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see it. Yeah, I see it as like an interest in like something that this group of people has something to lose. So how do they not lose it? They go off and codify people and try to make people into different groups and then pit them against each other.
Yeah. But this is an open forum. But
I'm not sure how deep you really want to go on this, especially on the religious part, because I'll crush that. But
look, this is to crush dreams and
that's all I'm about. You know that. So.
And wake people the fuck up. No, Britt, I want you to be unfiltered, and I want you to talk. No. Fuck that. I want to hear the whole shebang-a-bang. This is a genuine conversation. That's what I want this to be. I don't want people to fucking hold back. I want you to, say what it is.
Exactly. All right, man.
How you feel. So please do.
I want to talk pick up on the point that Ethan was talking about, just in terms of how this small group of people from a worldwide perspective has all this power, and how they are keeping this power through the brainwashing of religion.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's go back to
the opiate of the
Pope Pius II made an edict that you could enslave Africans if you labeled them savages. The Catholic Church, with the church in general, is the biggest problem from an economic perspective. I mean, there's a reason why that Notre Dame helmets are gold. That's a smack in the face to us as Africans. Yeah. But that's another subject. When you have leaders of churches okaying the enslavement of a group of people for economic purposes, I mean, you have to start there. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
It's so much deeper than this pussyfooting bullshit that, I mean, the church was in on it. Like,
yeah.
And we look at these same people as, whatever you believe in. I've told you before, I'm over that piece. I was raised Christian. After learning the history,
how many people went to Catholic school here?
We all did, and I'll never send my son there ever.
Went to the same school.
Exactly.
We all went to Purcell.
Right. Yeah.
We all went to Purcell. Seems like us Cincinnati guys, and knowing the history of how, especially the Catholics, how they were in on this, and you look at their elaborate churches and their elaborate cathedrals and all the money they've made by milking African Americans in so many ways, starting with Constantine. So we got to study the period from 1482 to 92, before Ferdinand and Isabella gave him the keys to go on this world domination tour in Spain, right? So I know, are we still on that point about 1400 Spain?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're not done.
Okay. So I'm just looking at in terms of, I mean, we even go back to one of the first slave ship was called Jesus of Lubbock, or Good Ship Jesus. Like, one of the first slave ships that brought us here was named after Jesus. How deep is that psychologically?
Seriously.
Like, come on, man. Like, it's historical record. It was captained by Sir Francis Hawkins. And he was a religious man. So these people who are supposed to be protecting us spiritually are the same ones who are economically gaining power to destroy us at the same time. It's not about none of the stuff that they say. It's like America doesn't stand for anything it says it really does. Like, this is all hypocrisy.
Exactly.
The greatest, and all men created equal. Yeah, all white men were created equal. When the flag was being sewn together, we were slaves. That flag means nothing to
a slave was fucking, sewing it together.
You look at the Drew Brees comments, it's just a disconnect between what it means to certain factions of white America and what it means to people who were crushed by America.
Yeah.
And slavery still exists. It's not something, the physical slavery might be over.
We talked about the prison industrial complex last week.
Oh, come on, man. And like you said, and it starts in school.
Absolutely.
I can show you how race is used to classify and categorize, especially African-American kids, into special education. Like they have a problem or an issue.
Remedial classes.
Yeah, come on.
Right?
Now, right?
And then what does that do to your psychology? As a high school student, what does that do? Crushes you. That's what it does.
There's a study that I showed my principal one time about how there is a psychologist working with an African-American girl, and she puts out all these different Barbies, right? And the girl picks up the white Barbie, It says, this is the standard of beauty. So she already feels as a Black child, because living in America, that she is not subhuman, but not as equal.
Lesser
right?
than.
Her self-esteem is crushed by, like, African American self-esteem is crushed by being here. My last name isn't Smith. That's my slave master's last name. We have no identity, none. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you
Eric, Eric, we had a
might be able
conversation
to
about
trace,
this recently too.
Cook,
His last
you
name.
might be able to trace your history all the way back to Europe.
I can, yeah. My
history is traced back to South Carolina.
Exactly.
My slave ancestors working in the indigo plantations.
Right.
Like, I don't know who I am.
Jennifer,
we
my
don't
wife.
know who we are.
Jennifer,
You know
my wife. Yeah, she has the whole list from Mississippi of each generation before the Tisdale, right? The Tisdale plantation that her entire family, worked on.
Right.
And then the list of the family tree. I've seen it, and it's just like,
it's deep, man. It's deep.
I almost was in tears when I saw that shit. I'm like, holy fucking shit.
Right.
And it's like, it's not that long ago either.
No.
Right.
Yeah. I was thinking about that actually.
Really not that long ago.
Right before this call, because I did that 23andMe thing, or whichever one I did. And it was interesting. Well, at first I was interested. I was like, oh wow, like I see where my family came from, like the Horn of Africa, and then like right above Egypt and all that kind of stuff. But then I'm like, there's almost 30% that's like unclassified European. And at first I was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, makes sense. Like I'm one third European or whatever, and my skin tone's light as hell. But then you're looking like, but then I was thinking about it today, just like right before the call, and I'm like, that's not really interesting. That's just proof that my family went through horrors generations ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this isn't a choice, This is something that happened to us. Like way before way down the line.
But society continues to remind you constantly. Don't
they? Yeah.
Because
or
the
they
system
tell you, it was so long ago. I literally yesterday somebody was like, you need to get over it. And I'm like, y'all don't understand. Like Jim Crow wasn't ended that long ago. Like there are people alive that lived through that.
The 1960s, people were getting hosed down the street and attacked by dogs.
Yeah, my parents were born
today. How many
56?
more videos come out? Yeah. How many more videos came out? I just watched the video from Atlanta.
Rashad Bird, I believe, is in.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but
that's this week. That was last week.
The gist of it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think this is, first and foremost, I want to say I'm glad to see everybody here on this panel. It's a lot of knowledge, a lot of education, a lot of strong people on this panel. Anthony, thank you for hosting this. This is quite lovely and very beautiful. And I think, I know you said like, hey, we hop off on tangents, but I think it's necessary, and I think we will continue to, because this is a culmination of events, throughout history, throughout time, that has led to this moment. And we can't ignore any of it, because I think it's all vital. I think it's all, necessary to come to some kind of resolution or create a path, a foundation to where we can build off of. So that way, the future children don't have to kind of suffer from such.
I'm doing this for Jackson.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And I have a few things to say. And, I think we talked about slavery and the economical value of slavery. Slavery is still, being deployed. I had my eyes open to a lot of different things, and a lot of intel coming down the line. Some things definitely, I won't speak about.
And you worked in intel. Speak a little bit about that too, just so people have context when they're hearing.
So basically, part of my job was, working with persons of interest to retrieve particular data that may be vital to for any support mission, whether it be at that point in time and beyond. And working with some of these people, obviously the skill set still kind of stays with you, and just kind of uncovering some of these things. And Britt was definitely, hitting the nail on the head. Even going back, if we look in history with religion, religion has been a very touchy but crippling kind of subject. We look at the Spanish Inquisition, look at what they did, out to kill people in regards of heresy, right? Look at, you know, the Crusades. You know, anybody who wasn't Christian, you know, pretty much fell at the knees of, you know, those crusaders, right? Because they were trying to address the narrative and create the platform for Christianity.
Labeling themselves heroes too, right?
Correct.
It's like giving yourself a self-proclaimed nickname.
Correct. And there is still slavery today in Yemen. You know, I hate to bring this up as a sore subject like Gaddafi. Gaddafi basically, you know, underneath his rules, slavery was punishable under death, right? By death. And removing an individual like that just kind of really opened things up. I'm not saying that he was the greatest, not in the slightest. However, there are certain principles that surrounded that he believed in that kind of allowed, you know, people of Yemen to kind of live a little bit more freely than they were. For instance, slavery. But now you can purchase a slave for as little as $200 in Yemen. Okay. So there is slavery still around the world. It's just not widely publicized or covered.
I've heard that though.
And you're right. And you know what? The narrative of painting the African American as a mongrel, as a savage, has been the constant narrative. And if we look in Americas, you know, not too far in the past, you know, that was the narrative being pushed, right? That these African Americans who are enslaved, who are in chains, which are hostages, because I don't really believe in slavery. I believe, you know, if you steal somebody from their country, that's, you know, you're kidnapping, you're holding somebody hostage. There is no bill that you sign that says, I have ownership of you. Nobody has ownership of anybody. So in that regard, and it is the influence of power, it's the manipulation to make them, people think that, hey, I am a slave, they have ownership of me. And so that manipulation gets rooted from the father to the son, or from the mother to the daughter. And as the generations continue, that is the narrative that's pushed, and people continue to believe that. And that's where we are in terms of racism.
And I think that's echoed by religion, and the religion that was then given and forced upon people, you know, of African descent in the United States, Christianity, right?
Yeah.
The servitude, the being comfortable with it, the whole submission, right? Of you know, to God. And the stories in the Bible constantly echo that, right? Yeah. How to submit, how submitting is a higher, you know, truth. You know, we see Jacob in the Bible, right? He was awarded all these wonderful things after he, you know, submitted to God after God had this bet with the devil and all of that whole story.
That's the New Testament though, right?
That's New Testament.
Oh, yeah, right. So look at the names in the New Testament versus Old Testament. New Testament is more European-esque. They plagiarized that joint and made it fit their narrative. The Old Testament says eye for an eye. The New Testament says obey your master. Now ask yourself why.
And religion has ultimate, you know, consequences, and you know that also weighs heavily in on people's, you know, thought processes. Really, when it comes to, you know, if you or I disagree on an economic policy or on a political philosophy, you know, it is what it is. You know, you can go with your whole life maybe being wrong, maybe being right. Who knows? You die, everybody forgets about you. But religion holds people in a different way because it tells them that they are ultimately right, that they're right beyond this life. And if you can, I mean, it's the king of psychological manipulation, dude. Because if you can convince somebody that you are ultimately right, or your way is ultimately right, then yeah, you'll have complete submission over that person, and they'll adopt the same thought processes that you do. And if they don't, guess what? Then you get to label them as other, and then you get to
a heretic.
Justify what you do to them.
Right, they're not the same as us, you know.
You get to persecute them.
Right, exactly. We're good people, but they don't think that way. They don't think the way that we think. So we gotta mess these people up. We gotta,
And there's another thing that I noticed about that in general is that when you're ready to so wholeheartedly believe this thing, you're way more susceptible to just latching on and believing a lot of other stuff. Like that's what I've seen in my experience. It's just easier to believe anything.
What did Malcolm X say?
What was that?
What did Malcolm X say?
A lot of things. You got to be
A
more specific.
a man that what is it? Shit, I'm fucking it up. If you can't, exactly. That's what I was asking y'all. I was trying to remember that shit. A man that doesn't stand for anything will fall for any. I'm fucking that up.
Oh, you stand for nothing, fall for anything.
Thank you, Jesus Christ.
I do want to throw one really thing. I'm sorry. I was remembering about Gaddafi. I remember reading a book a long time ago. I want to say about a decade ago. I find it interesting, and I wanted to make sure that it was in fact Gaddafi, but he did, as you mentioned, he was not a good person. I do find it interesting the fact that he did have laws that you said prohibited slavery, but he kept slaves himself in his own home.
Right.
Like many of the U.S. presidents.
Yeah, I was about to say it sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it, I'd have to go back and see what that law actually says. How does it pertain to the community? How, because you're in a position of power, you can bend those laws.
Right.
It doesn't pertain to Gaddafi. Gaddafi can have as many sex slaves as he wants in his home, held captive.
You can't.
Well, he's the boss.
But he's the boss.
And
but
also,
he's the boss.
And not to defend him at all.
Oh, of course not. No.
Most of his servants were actually his bodyguards. He kept like an array of female bodyguards.
He did.
Constantly. I think, I wouldn't say that he didn't own slaves because honestly, again, I don't know every speck of intel out there. But I just thought it was quite unique that he, kind of made slavery punishable unto death.
Like he had like a firm stance against it,
I wouldn't say, again, he's not the greatest. I wouldn't say he had a firm stance against it. But I just thought it was unique that he did not allow other people to own slaves or purchase slaves from Yemen, in which some other countries would do such a thing. And that would be punishable under death. So again, Ethan, you're probably right. If you're in power, you can do whatever you want, essentially. And that's what it is in the United States as well. If you're in power, you can do what you want. However, I think we forget as people that even in the Declaration of Independence, it says we the people, right? And it's the people that give power to these particular individuals. So it is our responsibility as a people to understand how powerful we are and to let these elected officials know, or whoever know, like, hey, as a people, we will and we can coordinate, we can converge, and we will relinquish that power and put somebody else who we respect and admire and feels like will do a better job or institute equality and inclusion amongst us as people. I think that's what I guess I was trying to go towards, and utilizing Gaddafi as relinquishing or punishing, any kind of slave master was just an interesting anecdote that I just kind of wanted to throw out there. Please, I do not support this man.
No, we're not saying you do.
I never thought that you did. I just found it interesting that we had such a stern way of enacting a law like that, while at the same time having holding people captive in his own home for the purpose of his own pleasure.
You could say the same thing about our past presidents. Whether it be George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. I mean, they owned slaves, and they were well, more so, Lincoln was against slavery, so it's,
so again, I don't know. Does it turn back to an economic thing?
What did you say?
Didn't it turn into more of an economic thing for Lincoln? or a favoritism? Like, what
I'm
was
not
his
quite
motivation?
sure.
I'm
I'm not
forgetting.
a historian, so I won't speak to that. I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. But I think someone said something interesting about Jefferson.
Oh yeah, Jefferson, he wrote, "We hold these truths self-evident that all men are created equal."
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's right.
And he had slaves, bro.
Yeah.
A little footnote
That
underneath
statement was
there.
not for black people.
Yeah. He had
Yeah.
a little more. He was doing a little more with slaves.
Yeah. Where's the fine print there?
I mean, look
Yeah,
at
exactly.
the 13, the
And there is
13
some scholarship that says, yeah, no, I mean, there is some scholarship that says, you know, that he felt really conflicted about it, about the owning of slaves, but, you know, feeling conflicted and,
Poor guy.
you know, like, I mean, you gotta punch through, man. You know, you wrote the freaking document, you wrote the letter to England that said, hey, man, this isn't cool anymore, and we peace out.
You know,
I
what?
mean,
And turn around and do the same thing to somebody else.
Right,
Exactly.
he had a good amount of influence. So,
I think
It's the same system they're running there. We're running here.
right.
It's
Yeah.
capitalism
Well, that's
disguised as democracy.
Mhm.
right.
You can't have both. I teach this in history. You can't have capitalism and fairness. It doesn't make sense. Somebody has to lose in America, and that is brown people.
And capitalism to work, yeah.
It doesn't work. Bill Gates can't have $100 billion. Somebody has to have $100 only.
Mhm.
Right.
You're born to be a consumer in America. Don't get it twisted.
That's why you have more liquor stores, gun shops, more Jordans, FUBU, Nike in the African American.
Yeah. Copy and paste distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Leaves the community on a daily, hourly basis, or every 4 hours, every 6 hours, something like that.
Oh yeah, that stat. And when you compare it to what was it? They were directly comparing the Jewish community dollar to the black dollar.
It's ugly.
Yeah, it's real ugly. I didn't like. I kind of knew that because
their money stays in their community like 16 times longer.
And I didn't know that until I moved here and then like started seeing the actual Jewish communities around Los Angeles. And it's like, you can tell the difference in just like a regular neighborhood and a Jewish neighborhood because
like Amberley Village here.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they have
true
synagogues,
story.
they're gigantic synagogues. They have their hospitals. It's like all packed into their community. They're all walking everywhere. Everything's walkable in the Jewish community. You see them walking to and from synagogue with the children, and you can see the cohesion in the community. Something
right, and that goes to the whole Sabbath. You know, from Friday night to Saturday night.
Sure.
And it's pretty incredible to watch once you actually start paying attention to it, and then you see why that stat is the way it is.
Yeah,
that's the community for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with race either. It's just the culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go against that a little bit though. I would say that.
Speak up. Yeah, say it.
No, just in terms of what they learned from the Holocaust. See, we haven't learned to take care of each other like they have. We're still looking for some respect from the white community, and they'll never give it to us on certain levels.
Right.
Because everybody learns, even in elementary school, if you want some respect, you fight the bully. You don't ask for civil rights. You don't get your ass kicked and ask for rights. Like, you demand that stuff. You demand it. So the Jews learned from the Holocaust, okay, we have to band together. We have our own communities, like you said, hospitals, schools, they fund each other, and we still buy brands because we don't know who we are. Like I said, my last name is Smith. Jews know who they are. We don't. So my identity is through Jordans and Polo. Right. We're still lost on certain aspects of identity and how to take care of one another based on what's happened to us in America.
Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective because, you know, the Jewish community, you know, they received reparations for their
they were able to bounce back.
We talked about reparations last week too. I have an idea. I'm going to plug it again. I think reparations should go not in form of necessary payouts, but as this, because I think this is going to affect, you know, African American community a lot more positively, and it is in the terms of loans and percentage rates for those loans. First for land and for mortgages should be at a 1.5% for life, right? And no bank should be able to refuse it. It should be against the law for any bank to deny
Ooh, they're gonna lobby
right?
against that, boy.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not done. I'm not done. And education, 1.5% interest rate on education, which is my next topic that we're going to jump into after this, is education in the African American community, and socioeconomic disparity, neighborhoods, disparity in those neighborhoods, and then small business loans at a 1.5% interest rate. Again, not being able to deny and illegal to deny from banks. Yeah. That's what I think reparations should be. Because here's the big argument that a lot of white people talk about that I hear is, and people in general, oh my God, how can we pay for that? Oh my God, how can we pay for it? Well, nobody have to pay for that. And it would equal the playing field that, again, had for so long been the whole system basically denied everybody. Yeah, exactly.
Undiscriminating somebody.
The how can we pay for this argument is one of the most hilarious things to me.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
like how do we
pay for everybody a stimulus check? The whole damn country. You can do it if you don't want to.
Exactly.
$30 trillion. What was that?
But that's their argument all the time. Yeah. And it's just like, well, the whole. If you think about it, and you really want to go there or pay for it, look at how African Americans have given America, how much money they've generated.
Here's the deeper
for
part,
America.
Real quick.
In general.
Here's the deeper part.
Yeah.
You give us reparations, we become like the Jews, and you can't take advantage of us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism has to exist. There has to be a group of people that you can point to and infiltrate your system with to make money. That's us. We were brought here as capital. We will remain capital in their eyes. If you give us reparations, you can't use us anymore.
Exactly.
We will free ourselves from America. Then who you going to pick on then?
Right.
And that's I think that might be the real issue, because
that's the issue. Same with college athletics. You don't want to pay the college athletes because they're mostly black.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're being held hostage still.
Yeah.
You're absolutely being held, and nothing's changed.
We're being held here
because you're still capital. You're still property.
But then you got to be careful, because that's the argument that people are going to make on the other side. They're like, oh, why are you playing the victim when everybody here is pretty successful in what they do already? And they're like, look, you're already on the even playing field, but you don't know. Like, I grew up right around the corner from Purcell. Every day I walk home, me and my boy Ray, y'all know Ray. We used to get chased home by dogs every day. If you hit the wrong corner, you had to fight somebody, or you get jumped, or you run home. Yeah. And I know people in the neighborhood that got killed, and we made it through that. But on the other side, if you're in a nice middle class or upper class neighborhood, you don't have to deal with any of that.
Nope.
So on top of all the shit that we have to go through at home, like my parents are great. I didn't have any issues with my parents or anything like that. It's just the surroundings that we were in. On top of all that, you got to keep up your grades. You got to stay out of trouble. You got to find your way to and from school sometimes when your parents are out working 2 jobs or whatever. And you have to deal with all this stuff while still trying to make yourself on an even playing field with everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, but
don't sit here never even.
Yeah, don't sit here and tell me how happy I should be with my success. You don't know how hard I worked already, and you don't know whether or not I feel like I need some help at this point. But then we can't get that same help in the general picture. But then they'll just sit there and look at you like, oh, you're a senior manager at such and such company. Like, why are you still complaining? Well,
for every one of us that makes it, 9 don't.
Yeah. Somebody gets killed or ends up in jail, or it
might be 3 out of 10, but the numbers ain't good.
What are the rates everywhere else?
Yeah.
Well, I had a friend of mine who talked to me about the generational trauma that comes with, no matter how successful you end up being, you still have a lot of generational trauma that remains in your system. Not to mention the fact that I'm going to find it right now, and you're going to have to be very patient with me. That there was a gentleman.
While you find that, I want to speak on the actual thing, because I thought about this earlier. My wife is Asian, she's Chinese, and we talk about this every once in a while, like just being out in public. Like, of course, we're an interracial couple. We get the looks. Cook, you probably get it too.
I've been spit on in public.
Ooh, no, that probably didn't end well, did it?
In Springfield, Ohio, yeah.
Yeah. Did he walk away?
my girlfriend at the time stopped me from doing something, but it was an older white man. I
was it?
I didn't say anything or anything. I was in straight attack mode. I was
Yeah.
ready. I was ready to murder, and she saw my face,
Yeah.
and
So
she held me back and gave me a big hug, and
Yeah.
I was ready to fucking kill that person.
Yeah. So speaking on that generational trauma, that's fucked up. Speaking on that generational trauma, like it's
Jen and I
just
still get looks in California.
in one of the most liberal place in America. But if you're, I think I didn't notice this until I started dating her. If you're a black man and just walk around in public, you're always on high alert. And I didn't notice that until I started dating her when we're out walking. And she's taking in the scenery. She's enjoying the story. She's pointing out stuff in windows and she's looking at, people or dogs and all this other shit. But what I'm looking at are the people looking at me.
Potential threats, because you're conditioned.
Yeah. Everything, it feels like everything is a threat all the time.
Just like in wartime, just like in war, right?
Yeah.
Eric?
What?
You're conditioned constantly to look for threats. Yeah.
Vigilance.
This book is called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which we just talked about the conditioning mentality. As an educator, I read this often because I deal with my students who come from those environments, and their minds are just, you can tell they're in survival mode all the time based on, the conditions they are forced to live in, in America. And their minds aren't ready they're not receptive to education because, like you said, they might have had 5 things they had to deal with just coming to school, in the morning. And, it's just, I teach at a school where the free and reduced lunch, like our whole school gets free lunch. Like that's the poverty rate at the school I work at. Like,
right.
So when you're dealing with that type of, impoverished mind on top of fighting those other things, that post-traumatic slave, we call it post-traumatic stress syndrome, but the post-traumatic slave syndrome of African-American people in America, passed down generationally is very deep.
Yeah. It compiles and compounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should do a show on that. I want to read that book.
Yeah. We can do that.
Probably like 2 or 3 weeks from now. Let's do a show strictly talking about that.
I got it off Amazon for maybe like $9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to buy it right now.
What was the name of that again?
It's Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joyce DeDuggery. Can you see that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can see it. Cool.
Amazon already had it up. Fucking listening, man.
Right.
Fucking big brother, man.
They are listening.
I'm reading right now. I'm reading Charlemagne's book, Black Privilege.
Yes, that's a good one too.
It's pretty good. I'm the first chapter in. It's pretty good. Solid book so far.
I did manage to find the interview. So it was a journalist, Roland Martin, who had an interview with Jane Elliott, who's an activist, and he was talking about the timeline when the Black community had supposedly all of their rights given to them, and the span is like 50 years, 52 years, where it's like, well, here you go. You got what you wanted, but only after God knows how many hundreds of years of so much trauma. So I think that I've even seen posts of it through Facebook, and it shows a little line graph, and it gives you the specific dates. And I think a lot of people reacted to it in a way of, oh, I had no idea. So you had to somehow pull yourself together as a community within a time span of about that much.
Yeah.
So so I would hope, I'm certainly going to look a little more into it, but just so I can get a better idea of what is generational trauma and the expectation of level playing field, that now it's all level. Now you should be grateful everyone is equal in reality. No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. But by
very
any
little
means,
additional help.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So it was so that was Roland Martin.
Roland Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like Roland Martin. He checks people a lot. It's a good watch. Real educated man who knows his history and will shut anybody down that comes with the falsehoods.
Speaking of history, I want to transition into education. And education specifically, in the African American community, and the whole kind of, again, control over those socioeconomic neighborhoods. you know, Britt, you went from a Montessori to Catholic school, right? Were you originally educated in public schools in grade school? You're muted.
I went to North Avondale Montessori.
Right.
From first through sixth grade. Like I said, even that was my mom understanding. You know, it's funny you say that now. She used to always tell me, your competition isn't your own people. You got to go learn the ways of those who are in power, which means you need to start your education around. I was always outnumbered in school. You know, I lived in the hood, you know, but I caught the bus and went across town to school. Mm-hmm. And that was for my mom's whole purpose, was for me to learn the white ways. I mean, we talked about this at home a lot. Like, my education was based on being able to compete in a world that wasn't designed for me to compete in, you know?
Right, exactly.
So going from,
and you had to conform.
My neighborhood school,
you had to conform.
Yeah, had to. Like, my neighborhood school had an F grade all the way down to state report card lines, right? Like, all my friends walked to school. I got on the bus at 5:45 in the morning.
Right.
Literally walked myself at 9 years old to the bus stop with a key to the house, you know, because that was what was needed for me to be in this place where I'm sitting today, you know. So education was of the utmost important. But, you know, when we talk about that, my home education was totally different from school. My mom told me that most of the stuff I would learn in school in history was a lie.
Exactly. That's my next point.
She re-educated me on all the stuff that they were trying to, the gruel that they tried to make you, force feed you, and, you know, about, you know, even small things like, we know now that, for example, Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. Right. It wasn't an accident. That's some BS, right? But they teach you that. They indoctrinate you early.
Absolutely.
To what they think America is supposed to stand for. Mm-hmm. In fifth grade, this is a quick little anecdote. I came home and said I wasn't saying the Pledge of Allegiance anymore at 10 years old. Whatever my gut feeling was about this standing up every morning and brainwashing me, I'm looking at all my classmates, and we're all just sitting here look like little.
I pledge allegiance, like little fucking zombies, robots, man. Yeah.
And she brought that up a couple of weeks ago, just, you know, with the climate, what's going on. I always had an inclination that something was wrong, but when you're 10, you can't express it, but you can feel it. I felt it.
Exactly. You may not be able to articulate it because you haven't had the education yet, right, to really know what that is,
right?
You know,
and identify
not
it,
right.
But you know, or if it smells like horse shit,
it probably is.
That's nationalism, essentially, and basically.
Yeah, it's like almost fascism.
That's how it's a selection process. It's going back, I mean, to even before, like, the First World War. They did this in order to build a society of people who are susceptible to manipulation to fight for a country, based upon whatever's argument. They didn't even have to know the details, but in order to get them to be on their side, they indoctrinated them into a theme or a concept that it is very patriotic, it is very American, European, African, Japanese of you, Oriental of you, to fight for this nation. That is just a nationalistic approach to get, you know, people to be more of a patriot, to fight when called upon. That's all that was, that Pledge of Allegiance crap.
That's deep.
And it goes back to that, you know, the xenophobia that we talked about that human beings tend towards anyways. This is like, we have these systems in place now that are exploiting psychological machinery that is in our brains right now that's running, that we don't realize. Unless you really get woken up to it, you might not realize it. And nationalism is second only to religion in this sense. And the fact that, you know, like, it has like an almost ultimate cause. Like, you know, I'm an American. I have to fight. I have to do this thing. I have to stand and play it, you know, say Pledge of Allegiance or whatever. I have to, you know, support a capitalistic agenda. I have to, you know, I want to be a good countryman, right? Because this is my home. This is where we belong. And I don't know what's out there where those other people belong. And, you know, I mean, it all plays in on it, man.
Which is crazy because that whole notion gets crushed when you actually start traveling and meeting people from different.
Oh, dude, and that's the thing. Like, so like back when we were evolving, like as we were coming up into what we are now, you know, Homo sapiens sapien, you know, we were not able to travel, but today you can travel across the entire globe in under 24 hours, dude.
Yeah.
So
you can talk to somebody right now, right? Across the globe.
Dude,
Yeah.
at the speed of light, you can speak to somebody on the other side of the world through radio, you know, through a radio wave. So it really is. We have completely gone beyond what the environment that we were in when we were developing as a human species, and our consciousness needs to grow along with that. You know, like,
and our laws and our systems have to grow accordingly as well. There needs reform.
Yes, man. Yes,
absolutely 100%. Needs reform.
100%, dude. And like, you have to, like what, you know, Richard Dawkins called it, you know, you have to raise your consciousness. We have to raise our consciousness as people.
Absolutely.
And realize that, you know, we are not.
And that goes, sorry to interrupt, but that goes into society as well.
Mm-hmm.
And to address what? Not just your waking consciousness, but your subconscious.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All the things that we repress, all the things that we try to sweep under the rug, the systematic racism.
Mm-hmm.
We try to sweep under the rug our original sin of the country, right? Mm-hmm. We just try to sweep it under there. We try to, you know, a lot of people want to stay quiet about it. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address it because they don't want to address the thing that they've repressed, that they know is wrong, that they feel in their gut is wrong, but they've been conditioned. Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Conditioned so long to make it feel okay.
But what happens every time we do that? Like, how long can you keep a lie before it comes back or it starts bubbling up again? Like, every time we see stuff like the protests happen, it's them trying to push that down, and it just keeps bubbling up because you don't want to confront it, so it keeps happening. And then when it gets to that boiling point, every time it's going to spill over, and it's going to keep happening again. Mm-hmm. And like, who was it? It's Germany who actually embraced everything that happened re the Holocaust, and they're able to actually address it and move forward. Which is why, like, if you don't do that, history keeps repeating itself, and we keep seeing that right now.
Yeah,
I mean, there's that disconnect. I think there's that genuine disconnect between, well, slavery happened a long time ago. Well, the civil rights happened actually not that long ago. These things did not happen not that long ago, but they think that it did. And I'm talking in they as in perhaps like the white community in general has such a difficult time talking about race because they never had to consider race ever until they were put in a situation
they have to be empathetic, and that takes work.
It does, but I think that the disconnect is that those are things that happened in the past. They do not pertain to me. Therefore, I am not guilty of perpetuating anything. When in reality, the silence itself speaks so loudly, which is why I often have frustration when I come across a person who does not want to talk about race, and the go-to is because it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm very sorry that it makes you feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, people are dying. No.
Yeah.
So I need you to get over the uncomfortableness.
Right. You feel
immediately.
Yeah, death is arguably the most uncomfortable thing.
But we also, as we evolve in our own lives, right, we have to go through uncomfortable phases to transition to that next stage of our lives.
You don't grow unless you're uncomfortable in doing stuff.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. It's a sign of growth, people.
Yeah.
Embrace the uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right?
I think if
that's a sign of growth.
Yes, and I think if the mentality were to go from it's going to be uncomfortable, but no one is mad at me, and no one is necessarily going to try to make my life absolutely miserable. What we want is a genuine understanding. At least at me, I'm Latin American. What I would like is to be able to have a conversation about race, and not have it shut down immediately. I'm not angry at any of my friends who have done that, but there is a genuine frustration of, but why do you get to brush it off so easily when it affects so many people? So I think if the white community were to look at this as let me just get through this, let me have the conversation, maybe they would be more open. I'm not sure. I've actually once asked a couple of my white friends, but why is it that you don't want to talk about race? And the number one thing that I heard was, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I am afraid people are going to think that I'm racist because of something that I say could be misconstrued. Those are the two fears. So,
Which
but I
every
just
time
didn't feel
you
viable.
every time you have that uncomfortable conversation, the next conversation gets easier. But you gotta just dig in.
Yeah.
I think
Which goes
Yeah.
to my next point of education and the importance of teaching true history and how America looks at Black history starting with slavery.
Mm.
Right? Because that's how they teach us in school, right?
Are
They
you
teach
talking about just in terms of teaching it in like the school, or to like the public and the people of America, or just starting
in
from
education.
Well,
I mean, right? You teach in high school.
education is just as systematically racist as any other business in America. I mean, education is a business.
That's what I'm
It's
talking
not
about.
educating. Trust me, I've been doing this for 12 years, especially in the public school setting. It is a revolving door of failure, and I'm an educator.
Which is hard for you to say.
That's why I ended up at private school.
That's uncomfortable. That's
Right.
uncomfortable and hard for you to say, isn't it? Because
I
you've
see it
tried.
every day.
You've tried.
I see it every day.
Britt's one of the hardest working people I know. This is how hard working and focused he is. He literally broke his back in a football game and walked to the sideline. He was like, my hamstrings are numb, and wanted to go back in the game. That'll tell you something about his mental discipline.
I got to get these tackles, man. But
and by the way, never had surgery to correct it.
no.
Just work through the thing.
I think from the the classic, once again, we talk about the field of education. I am one of 2 Black men that teach at my school, where the rest 98% of the staff is white. You got a 90%, staff of white people teaching poor Black kids. The disconnect is automatic.
Yeah.
I mean, in Cincinnati public schools, the suspension rate from Black to white kids is almost 4 to 1. So you talk about race and data, right? That allows you to classify and then say, look, once again, even standardized testing, we know that it is racially biased.
Yeah.
ACT, SAT, state testing. The Black kids aren't going to score on it like the white kids will, which allows America, once again, to classify.
Right. And I have something to add towards
hold on.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Prisons are built based off 3rd grade reading levels.
Right.
The state of Ohio, most states, especially in California, you guys got supermaxes, and I mean,
oh yeah,
it's crazy.
The prison industrial complex out here is the
brown and
factory.
Black people in California are being railroaded. The new slavery is prison, and it starts in school because you have to undereducate in order for you to be there. See what I'm saying? There has to be people. Prisons are on the stock market. Somebody has to be in those beds. It starts in school. You get it yet? Like, this is so deep, and it's the systematic racism is just so entrenched in what we're allowed to teach, what we can teach. So you talk about teaching true history. I have to do 2 things when I teach history. I have to teach them the standardized test version, and then I have to tell them the truth.
Right.
I mean, I'm doing double work, especially from an African-American kid. I feel an obligation. I have to tell them that, like,
I'm glad you do.
Earlier, you brought up a point about Lincoln. Lincoln did not give a damn about African Black people. The Civil War was a ploy. The South wanted to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. We're not giving up slavery. It's free economics down here. We're getting free money. You got your labor unions up north. You guys got to pay. So you want trying to bring the country together on a uniform platform for economics. The South said, nah, we're good. Lincoln was going to force them to become a part of the Union, hence a war. It was never about doing what was right and freeing us. He said himself, Lincoln's, I don't have the book in front of me, but the quote, the Black man and the white man cannot live side by side in America based on what has happened to them. It's just crazy to think that was going to work. That also, I mean, my whole theory about him being assassinated is just that, because Lincoln was going to send us back to Liberia. Lincoln was going to send the slaves out of America. So once again, we can't get rid of our chattel, our labor system, which is the Black people. We're going to exploit them until the sun burns away in this country. They're going to be exploited here. Somehow, some way, we're going to be economics for the greater, not the greater good, but just the capitalistic system that we were forced to be a part of. Starts in school now.
Right.
School.
Well, I think it started before school, even during that time, as you meant, Brett. Like, look at the 13th Amendment.
Yeah.
Slavery is still embedded inside the 13th Amendment. It's just punishable under law. So
Right. So if you're a felon,
Right.
correct, you can still, that is the indentured servitude or slavery is the prison system. And that's why that's why they made that constitution or that amendment, is because they wanted slavery to continue. And then they just embedded it inside education.
Right. That's how you get them there.
Correct.
You undereducate them and misinform them and make it hard for teachers to teach true history and to teach them valuable skills to go out here and make a living for themselves and have an identity. We can't do that in the, where private schools, our teachers, guys, they didn't have to follow the state of Ohio's curriculum. They could get creative. They could do other things that, spark the light. Mm-hmm. We're told what to teach from first quarter to fourth quarter. And we have a pacing guide we have to stay on, where we should be at midterm, second quarter, right? So, and none of it is really, all the kids are asleep. It's not exciting because it's just it's like the indoctrinating history they want you to know.
It's
like you said, to make you a good nationalist.
It's like a factory more than an aesthetic approach. It doesn't give leeway to creative thinking, creative problem solving, and really understanding the material that's in front of you. They want to kind of regurgitate, and that is the manipulation, the material that's in front of you. So you don't have the time to kind of think. And they threw all the tests out there. I think in Florida it was like the FCAT and all this other crazy stuff they were throwing out there. And that was basically, I feel that was designed to allow students, more so of people of color, which I hate that terminology, to fail and then go back to the drawing boards and then go back to, trying to the remedial education. And now they're classified as someone who is special ed, if you will. All right. And then when you get to that point, it's something that activates you in you, especially as a person of color, to say like, well, hey, if I'm not good enough, then what I'm going to do is just go to earn the money a different way. I'm going to go out there on the streets. I'm going to go sell drugs. I'm going to go rob somebody. Since I can't get a solid education, since I can't pass these tests that's before me, I'll go and do something else to try to earn money. And then here we are again, and the prisons and the slavery and the indentured servitude, just to say, hey, look, time served, I did my part, I could come back out, but they go right back in. It's just a recidivism.
Then that's and then at that point, that's where we keep seeing all these stats. Like everybody likes to throw out all these stats.
Yes.
But we just did like a short pass of the entire history. Everybody wants to see the easy stats so they can say, this is the thing, this is why, this is what needs to happen, and this is what's currently happening. But all they see are those stats, and they don't see the path that it takes to get there. And nobody wants to do that work. Nobody wants to learn the actual path that it gets there, because all of this stuff that we just spoke about is involved in the road to getting to that, black on black crime stat, or the education stat, or the SAT or ACT stat. Like all this stuff plays a role in it, but we never hear the full story. And part of that is on, like, it's the exact thing you were just talking about with education, Brett.
Yes.
Like you only get what is in the curriculum, like what you're allowed to learn and what you're supposed to. But there's this whole other side of history. There's this whole other side of education. There's this whole back end to the research on how these stats came to be.
Absolutely.
And we'll never know that story unless people actually speak about it like we're speaking about it now.
And your parents have to teach you that. I mean, how much was your mom, Britt, teaching you outside of what you were learning in class? And how much, and what do they teach? What do they tell you to teach? That's what I want to know from you specifically.
What do they tell me to teach?
To teach about African American in your history class. Yes.
Like you said, it starts, unfortunately, with slavery. So once again, you indoctrinate, especially, young African American children, to believe that that's what they are. They don't know about Mansa Musa. They don't know about, the city of Cordova. They don't know about the Dogon tribe. They don't know about all these outstanding things that our people did before this happened to us. That would breed self-esteem, and they don't want that. They don't want black self-esteem. Yeah. They don't want that, because that's dangerous.
Talk about backgammon. Yes, sir. That came from talk about arithmetic, talk about astronomy. Spain,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
didn't know anything
Sirius
about
B star. Yeah.
or astronomy until the Moors came and conquered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that stuff, that kind of stuff should be taught inside the school systems.
We civilized most of Europe.
Exactly. I didn't know any of that. And be honest with you guys, I don't have the degrees and stuff like some of the people on this call, but, the military really gave me a lot of access, and I used that to my advantage. I didn't learn in Florida education doesn't really kind of preach about, success in the African-American community, at least at my time when I was going to school. And I learned most of my stuff through just basically researching while in the military and having that access. And I learned about the Moorish community. I learned about, the true African-American. I learned about, Black industrialism and what we were, bringing to the table as a Black Wall Street and how they shut us all down and things of that nature. And that's the kind of things that, the African-American community or Black American, Afro-Caribbean, because my family comes from the islands. So we didn't really have that kind of platform of education. And just learning that stuff, I teach that stuff to my daughter and try to let her understand, like, hey, this is the value of a dollar. It is nothing until you give it value. You have to, don't work for the dollar. You let the dollar work for you. Yeah. And understanding that essentially you are a commodity. You are the dollar. And the whole game is creating a monopoly on the people. And once you have a monopoly on the people, you have power. You have your economics, you have your religion, you have all of these culmination of events that gives way to certain circumstances like slavery, racism, and so on and so forth. So I think just to say that, you're really hitting the nail on the head. And I think that is the conversation that should be happening, period, everywhere. Not just, stop killing Blacks, but hey, the preaching of how powerful the African-American community is from the beginning, from antiquity. That's what should be taught. And that's the conversations that we should be having.
Absolutely. And that's what we have to teach our kids, right? Outside of the terrible arithmetic that's being taught to us in education, right?
Yeah. You know who has a lot of our artifacts from who we are?
Britain.
Huh?
Britain.
No. Catholic Church in the Vatican.
Oh, hell.
Catacombs.
Yep.
They have so much of the Black Madonna and Child, right? Jesus, when we go to those old parables and those old stories from, Christianity, Islam, they all come out of Africa anyway, the Nile River Valley. They all started there. So once again, we go from an education point where we as Africans civilized the European, taught them what we knew, then they enslaved us with the same knowledge. That's broke us down like we didn't even create it. It's like, wow.
Right, because they try to erase it.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about that last week, and, all of Britain and France going to the pyramids and shooting the noses off of, all of the statues and everything like that to, make them look more white, even, trying to cover that up constantly.
That was the Moors, wasn't it? The Moors that taught all the Europeans all of that.
Yes.
They came to study at the feet of the Africans and took that knowledge back to Europe. Yeah. And then they got their plan together and enslaved us with our own knowledge.
Yep. Even Alexander the Great went and studied.
Absolutely. Wow.
Very interesting.
Yep. And we need to get this knowledge out. That's why I think this show is going to be really important for people to watch.
You know what I don't hear? Educate. You know what I don't hear about a lot? I don't hear about the Germanic rule, or even should I say the Second Reich. A lot of people don't talk about the Second Reich because that's essentially when our Holocaust, if you will, began. How do you think, the Germans or the Nazis came up with these chemical compounds and knew that they were, that they would be effective? It started, or even going back to Leopold, it started back in Africa. Okay.
That's where they did all the testing, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. Millions.
Still doing it now. How often do you see all these, viruses, Ebola, and all this shit
Affecting black
somehow
people.
coming out of Africa, right? So they send troops and everything over there, and what do?
Bro,
we need to save the world.
We've been living with diseases of ours. There are over like 300 something thousand viruses and diseases out there that we live with on a daily basis. Okay, majority of this shit is man-made. There's only top 16. There you have your chemical, your biological, your radiological, and then you have your nuclear.
Right.
This whole, like, I know we're jumping off the subject here, but you just brought this up and it kind of pisses me off. This whole COVID thing is totally ridiculous and it's a farce because first and foremost, there are so many different levels of COVID that have existed over the last decade, all right, that hasn't been very instrumental in death inside our society or globally, if you will. There's so many other viruses out there that are deadly that we should be on the lookout and should learn about. But this whole COVID thing is just smoke and mirrors for a vaccination to, again, monopolize a population and control a population, absolutely. And destroy a genetic code that they do not want to be passed on. And that is the code of knowledge of your ancestry and who you are, essentially as African American. It's a targeted experiment. Because breathing, let me tell you, like going to school and being a gastro engineer, learning about chemical, biological, radiological, and I'm sure Ethan can talk about some of this working in the healthcare, learning about this stuff, wearing a mask, right? Even if it's not like a 12 micron filter on it or whatever, wearing like a shirt to cover your face is not going to fucking help you, okay? It is not going to help you. You can still contract that virus. You're sitting here touching everything. If somebody coughs, the common reaction, even if you have a shirt over you, you cough, the common reaction is to cover your mouth, right? Because that's what we're taught. Your finger fucking the pears, the strawberries, the groceries at the store or whatever. Then you go home, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to wash that shit because you're in a rush. You got kids, you got to get the meals ready or whatever. Then you go back and use that same hand and you're like, oh, the spaghetti tastes great. There we go. You've already contracted that virus, all right? So for people to say like, hey, you have to make sure you cover your face and all this other stuff, it's a farce. It's a crock of crap. Yes, people do get sick if you're elderly. Yes, if there are pre-existing conditions, absolutely. The common cold kills so many freaking people a fucking year. Okay, so for them to say like, this is the most deadly virus that we've ever, get the fuck out of here. You know what a virus is? You know what a deadly disease is? How about talking about a blood agent? How about talking about like a blister agent or a nerve agent or sarin gas, which was actually just dropped in fucking Syria not too long ago? Jesus. That is the kind of stuff that people should really be knowledgeable about and understanding, because this implementation of this kind of totalitarian rule leads to more racism, leads to more discrimination, and it just keeps the fucking Ouroboros and snakes eating its fucking tail.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I mean it just. No, I'm very passionate about this particular subject because it's a fucking crock of shit. Sorry for my language. Sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. This is a non-apologetic show.
Share your feelings, Eric. Share your feelings.
It's not feelings. That's what he knows.
I'll be the voice of dissent about the coronavirus thing, just because.
Yeah, please. I want to hear both sides.
Well, I mean, so yeah, coronaviruses are naturally occurring. There are lots of different types of them. Just like there are different types of all different kinds of strains of viruses. But with this one, I think the big danger was that this virus showed a increase in infectivity. Now, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to speak like one, but with the authority of one. But from what I've read and from what I've heard, I work with medical professionals, so working with them, listening to them talk about this virus. And the way that I feel about science in general is that, and you might say that it could lead to maybe some gullibility, but when an informed person speaks about something and they're afraid of it, I kind of perks my ears up, because like I have to think and see for myself, if they're out wearing masks, if they're out doing, trying to protect themselves and take, different precautions than they would normally in a situation. I think it's something that people need to pay attention to. Now, I do agree there's a lot of misinformation, but I mean, I will say that I think that it is, and there certainly are a lot, there are definitely a lot more lethal viruses and, lethal chemical agents and things of that nature. But this has been it's a pretty eye-opening experience, and it's actually pretty scary to see. And we're learning more and more every day. Initially, there are reports that this came out of a biologics weapons lab in China. Then, a group of virologists were looking at it and said, no, it doesn't look like a manufactured virus. On the genetic level, it doesn't look like, what we would expect. And now there's more conflicting reports about, possibly being from the Wuhan biologics weapon laboratory. So, I mean, we'll have to see. Like in the next year, we'll see. But
that's something I want to talk about too today, is how quickly history that's currently being written changes now, and how easily it's being rewritten. I'll give you a perfect example. I tried to look up and rewatch the George Floyd footage, right, in its entirety.
Right.
It went on Google. I went on YouTube. I used DuckDuckGo. I used every search engine I could possibly think of. It's taken down the whole video in its entirety. Just snippets are still up, but it's taken down on all those different outlets, right?
Yeah.
How quickly now, more than ever, is history being constantly rewritten and censored?
Well, right now, there was an article that came out maybe, I don't know, a week ago about some lab, I forget exactly where it was, that claimed that they could prove that COVID-19 was man-made in the lab. And now when you type in that same search query, the top 3 articles from Forbes, from ABC News, from Business Insider are all about those exact claims being dismissed. So this is where we keep going back.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You mean the scientists who worked at Harvard?
Was it Harvard?
Yeah.
Yeah, those people were. Some of those people
made like $50,000 a month, and then there was also 2 Chinese agents. They didn't know, they were disguised as students or whatever, but they worked for the agency, for the Republic of China. And then there was also a gentleman in Texas, I forget what institution, but he also received payment to kind of work on a different, or either the same or a different strain of what we call COVID-19. And there was also somebody in Florida. But you're absolutely right. These articles will be hard to find. There are different, Anthony, we can talk in person if you want, the different ways of acquiring different information.
Please, because right now it's making me dizzy getting true knowledge and like really factual based information now. It's so hard. And, I'm going to have to say this, but this is the one thing I do agree with Trump on, this whole fake news thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they call it, broadcasting. I mean, if you really kind of look at the grander scheme of things and see where the control comes from, the news station it's definitely not what it used to be. And in any shape or form, it is just it's a strategic narrative.
That's what I'm saying.
Visual concept that embeds particular ideas over a mountain of information that is not even applicable most entirely to the average human being, but it's done so it's so methodical and it's so surgical how they input different. I'm just going to be careful here. So the way they input certain information is designed to create a particular circumstance or event, whether it be within the next year, 2 years, or 3 years, to allow for division of the people. You know how they say, like, the left is trying to do this and then the right is trying to do that. I mean, but ask yourselves, why is the Democrats blue and the Republicans red? Why are the Bloods blue? Why are the, why are the Bloods red and the Crips blue? Why is this always this constant division? Right? Why is it black and why is it white? Okay, even if you go back to, I know I'm going around circles because I'm just trying to not, I just have to be careful. But if you even thinking about going back to the Bible, it says Jesus was copperas in color. Who told anybody that we were white and we were black? Okay, it's an old concept for a division of people, and they generate these broadcastings in order to continue the narrative, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I wanted to trace back to it's indoctrination, the beginning of it.
Right.
But that goes back to your point.
I think
you
it
were
was
saying
Plato
about
who
media.
said, Britt, you may know this. I think it was Plato or Socrates who said the moment we go from oral to communication to written, we have lost the initiative of the human condition, and it becomes a crisis of consciousness.
Right. I haven't heard that before, but yeah, that's deep.
Okay.
I did want to make one quick clarification about the Moors. It was something I remembered and I wanted to look it up real quickly. So it's in reference to the Berbers, so the Arabs that came through from Northern Africa, which makes sense because that would be the reason why in the Spanish language we adopted certain Arabic words to our own and we still use them today. So just a clarification on it.
Sure. I think it was Tariq, or he was a general that came over and to conquer Spain, right? I think he was tasked. Sandra, he was a general.
I can certainly look. It was a while ago since I was studying this. Could you said Tariq?
I think so, Tariq or Taraj or something to that nature. He was a general that was tasked to come over to conquer Spain. I believe it was.
Just conquer Spain.
I think so.
Tariq ibn Ziyad is who I have, who led the Muslim conquest of Spain.
Correct.
Died around 720, Berber general.
Yep, Berber general. Yeah.
For you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice. I'm dropping knowledge. So I want to do a little shift. We got very serious with all this, which is perfectly.
Sorry.
Okay. No, it should be. It should be getting fucking serious. I want to talk about, well, this is also serious, but Dave Chappelle's little drop this week with his video 846.
Dude is the GOAT, man.
Yeah.
That he is. So I got some topics of discussion I kind of wrote out. Some of them may be offensive, but hey, I don't care. So first question and topic of discussion is, how do we feel about Chappelle saying that celebrity silence isn't complacency?
Ooh, in some cases, I think.
His statement was saying, look, the streets are doing the work, right? That's what he was trying to say.
Yeah, and then also on top of that, he's already spoke about this before in previous specials.
Yeah.
It was hilarious to see. This is the thing about having those two different sides of Facebook. It's hilarious to see people on the left, liberals, ultra. Also that term, I don't think the liberals that everybody's talking about are liberals. They're like super far left. They're the antithesis of the people that are like super far right.
Yeah.
They're like doing the most. They're doing way too much.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are doing it in our names, and we're like, nah, y'all need to chill.
It's extremism. Extremism is.
Yeah, it never works. You need to be moderate about everything, because there's two sides to every story. But to go back to that, like having these two things on my list, like you have the people on the left, like, yo, where's Kendrick Lamar? Why hasn't he said anything about it? Kendrick's been rapping about this stuff for
a whole album
since he came on the scene.
Alan was talking about this shit.
What else does he need to say?
Where's Tupac? Where's Tupac? Like, what
yeah,
the fuck?
right. And then you have people on the right propping up people like Lil Wayne, who, mind you,
oh, man,
we've already been through it with Lil Wayne. first of all, dude's been rich since before he had hair on his chest.
15.
So he has no
He
stake
was
in this.
15
He's been
when he
rich
started
forever.
rapping with those guys.
So
yeah.
he's not gonna
Okay.
have any issues. Like if you've seen his interviews with cops, he doesn't care. He just acts like a rich spoiled dude. He just talks to them any way he wants
Yeah.
to lawyers and everybody. So like he does.
He
This is the
afford
same.
to.
Yo, this is the same dude that said in his song that got pulled. I'll beat that up like Emmett Till, and he thought that was okay. So we're not taking any advice from this dude. What do you mean? He doesn't matter. And then everybody else has already said their say on it. Why do they have to keep saying, like, what was Dave Chappelle's joke about this exact thing? Like,
Dude, Ja Rule.
Where's Ja Rule?
Two different
Somebody get
specials,
Ja
by the
Rule.
way.
I remember right around September 11th, Ja Rule was on MTV. That's what they said. We got Ja Rule on the phone. Let's see what Ja's thoughts are on this tragedy. Who gives a fuck what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this, nigga? This is ridiculous.
Have I not ever said anything about these things before? So now all of a sudden, this nigga expects me to step in front of the streets and talk over the work these people are doing as a celebrity? Answer me. Do you want to see a celebrity right now? Do we give a fuck what Ja Rule thinks?
Where's
We
Ja?
need Ja.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit.
About
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. This whole
But I think
celebrity
that,
complacency, like, do they need? I don't need
I
to
think
have
that
a celebrity tell me that this is how I should think, because that is the system, right? That's feeding back into the whole mindset of I need to listen and follow, right?
but I think that there's the issue of power, and what does money equals power, and so if you have Black celebrities that could be, we talked about how the Jewish community kind of reinvests in itself, and they take care of themselves or whatnot. Like we can go back to that and talk about the Jewish people have been getting hated on for over like 2,000 years. So like they kind of had to, like they had to be like, well, yeah, we're going to have our own bakery, we're going to have our own doctor's offices, we're going to have our own all this shit, because we can't go out there or else they're going to fuck our shit up. So it goes back, and we need that in the
or buy it out from under us.
Right.
I had a conversation with Jen about this with the whole Beats thing and Dr. Dre.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we need exactly. Yeah. So we need a movement like that in the African American community, and not that it hasn't happened before.
Yeah, it has happened before.
We did.
Yeah.
Black Wall Street. Then what happened to that? What happened to that?
And
They burned it down.
Right. Exactly.
Drop the bomb
It
on me.
hasn't happened since. It hasn't really happened since. Every community you have that's predominantly Black, they set up shit to make it so that community does not thrive. You got to live in every corner.
Drugs and guns.
And on top of that, we were speaking on that point. We talk about this amongst our own race, but the Black capitalist is no better than the white capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Most of our athletes are Black capitalists. They're slaves to the check. They're not Michael Jordan. We talked his whole thing. He ain't out.
Talk on that a little bit.
I need these shoes, dog. So
he gave that $100 million. What do you think about that, Britt?
Overspending.
I mean, yeah, that's cool, I guess. But
is that
too late though? Is that too late?
Money comes and goes. A voice can stay forever. It can echo in eternity. I mean, look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The more you speak out, just using him more specifically because I've heard posts about him, just recently. And I'm typically quiet, just so you guys know. I don't really jump on this kind of stuff because having a military background is just get as much information as possible, see how it all unfolds.
You're literally,
and look at the strategic value of what's happening.
Which is the right way to do it, but yeah.
Correct. But just to kind of hop on that, like we need a voice, and someone said, hey, we need, what? I'll just make this quick little sidebar. We need African Americans to speak the truth like Jesus Christ did. Speak the truth like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did. However, I hear them and I understand it. I try to understand everybody's perspective, but they killed them for it.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them, they beat him senseless throughout the streets, drug him through the streets, okay, hung him up on a cross, and then killed him. The other one, they almost did the exact same thing to him and his party members. They beat him, drug him through the streets, you know, all of this.
They assassinated him. The government assassinated him. Yeah. His family won that case, by the way. You can look it up on Google now.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right now.
Oh, yeah.
In 1999, the family of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. won the case against the U.S. government, proving that they legally assassinated him, that the government of the United States of America assassinated him, put the hit out on him. And it details who they hired, which was this guy that happened to escape from jail, right? Just basically let out the fucking back door.
There's so many went and killed him. There's so many, not sorry for this kind of analogy, but there's so many holes in that. It's hard.
It's Swiss cheese as fuck. It's Swiss cheese.
But I only brought that up to say this is if we should not have celebrities speaking out and just don't. I mean, money, okay, great, but you need a voice of influence, and a voice of influence can be a voice of power. But the people need to understand that.
I think it needs to be unified. I think it's not just one person. I think.
Let me tell you, and you saw this video, Anthony. I shared this with you because if it doesn't happen, you know what's going to happen. As some of you guys, I think it was Britt and Sandra. I think you mentioned something too. What's going to happen is the people are going to consolidate, right? They're going to coordinate. They're going to understand we have these small pockets of like Black Lives Matter raised here and then it dissipate. You know, we had the civil rights movement here and then it dissipate. We had all of this here and then it dissipated. What's going to happen is these small little explosions, these little sparks is going to create a massive fucking fire. And if people are going to understand where they stand and they're going to create this line in the dirt, and you talk about a massive fucking force, okay? And it's going to destroy America. Who's going to win? If we sit here and we kill each other, who's going to win? And I don't think it's a matter of just, you know, education reform or reparations or, you know, we need some kind of political reform. It's about a conversation of humanity. It's about a conversation of humility and consciousness. And if we don't understand that we are all living this life for the first fucking time, and we make mistakes, and we're trying to all just figure this out, and we need to and that the correct initiative is to come together as a people and figure out, hey, how do we continue on this life as our time may be done as older leaders, but for the future, so that way they don't have to endure this particular crisis or bullshit like this. That is the primary initiative I think that should be happening. Right. Or else it's just going to get 10 times worse, and we're going to see a lot of chaos and destruction before it all, you know, unfolds to some kind of reasonable resolution. Just in my experience of like being deployed, and I've seen this kind of shit happen in other countries, unfortunately, and it's no good for anybody. Nobody fucking win. Nobody win.
First thing, or you know what? In my humble opinion, the first thing that needs to happen, and I don't see this anywhere, especially not in any of these Facebook opinions or articles or anything, is people being okay with being wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong, even if they know they're wrong. They're not going to admit it. And nothing changes until people can admit that what they thought they knew, or the opinion that they held, was not right. And it's not about, you know, it's right for me. This is a national conversation, so it just can't be everybody has their own idea of right. Like, you got to meet somewhere in the middle. You got to be able to bend. You got to be flexible, because if you don't bend, you just break. You know, and that's what you're talking about. Like, if we can't bend as a country, we're gonna break, and you've seen it happen before. And that's the scary part. Like, it's such a simple thing. Admit you're wrong, learn from it, don't be wrong again. Right. It would be so frustrating for me personally, to just have somebody know that they're wrong, or for me to be wrong about something and know that I'm wrong, and not, you know, try to better myself by learning about why I was wrong. Like, I don't know why it's not like that for everybody, but that would be like, that feels like life wasted to me.
Right. But this country, that's pride. This country, where those who didn't do the manual labor, but those who sat back and watched those who do the manual labor built this country, those folks base this country on pride. Mm-hmm. That flies around in the South now is our Confederate pride, our Southern pride, and people's pride, especially men, especially well-off white men, even the broke ones. Their pride won't let them say, "I was wrong. This was wrong. My opinion was, or my what I thought was right is wrong. What I had been taught for X amount of years was wrong. The history that we were all taught was wrong. The teachers teaching the shit. Those who are conscious and aware of it, but there are tons who are not. So they continue teaching this bullshit history and these books that omits half of what really happened. It just blankets shit and sugarcoats it to the point where you don't even realize they're kind of telling you the slaves came over here on the boat. They were here. They built it. They did this. They did that. But as they're teaching you this, they so slick with the shit. You don't even recognize those people were brought over here by force. They didn't pack up bags and come over here. But the way history is taught to you, the shit is taught to you in such a, it's, pride will not let people admit they were wrong. And there is too much American pride in this damn country for people to admit American history is wrong. It's a lie and it's wrong. And they ain't gonna never admit
or our
that.
system's wrong, or we have flaws.
Half the shit that this country functions on is wrong. 90% of what this country functions on is wrong. But
it's right for a small majority, but it's wrong for the broad majority of everybody.
It's exploitative. It's exploitative.
Yeah. Right. Because
that's the design of capitalism, though. It has to be. That's where we live. Somebody has to lose. You know, unfortunately, that's been us.
I think it goes back to what Britt said about having a system, an education where they've conveniently omitted very important parts of our involvement.
Redacted.
Redacted. Which you don't later find out. I mean, you find out later on, and you realize how much we really should have been very honest about what we did. Right. It does paint a very nationalistic picture of what it means to be American, which means that our decisions and how we approach things are the correct way. We're righteous. We're doing it for the betterment of our countrymen and countrywomen. It's pretty terrible. I once had not an argument, but a discussion with a friend of mine about the United States involvement in the 80s in Central America and what that meant for them. And I think that they were very shocked because they said, well, I have a background in American history, and I don't remember, knowing any of this. I've never heard of this.
Of course
and
not.
It was conveniently taken out because they're not going to teach that. They don't want to raise children with the idea that we didn't always do things in the way that we were supposed to. And unfortunately, there were groups of people, there were nations that took the brunt of it, and we walked away with our hands clean. It's concerning that's the idea, and I think that it's harmful. It builds up a false sense of confidence in ourselves as Americans, and it's just generally just very harmful. It's very harmful because we're not being held accountable for our own mistakes, and we can't look at ourselves under a microscope and go, well, let me pick apart the pieces that are genuinely wrong. We need to talk about it. But I'm sure
it's so hard to find that stuff. It's so hard to find it.
That's what I'm saying. It's constantly being rewritten.
It's also, I think it has to do with, with like when we're talking about education and, Jim was talking about our identity as Americans and like, what was the identity of Americans?
Right.
When you have an identity with something, a lot of core beliefs are tied to that. And core beliefs are things that we hold, to be intrinsically true. Like, these are the beliefs that we will die before we give up. And, when they look at, people with, psychologists have done studies on people who've, looked at and been asked about their political beliefs and then maybe been presented information that contradicts them. And when they look at these people under like, functional magnetic resonance imaging studies on these people's brains, they're looking at their brains and they're seeing that the same areas that are lighting up, that are showing activity when people's core beliefs are challenged, are the same kind or the same areas of the brain that are light up when you're under a physical threat. When somebody's like actually attacking you physically. So
it's
again,
that deeply ingrained to react that way
Oh,
when somebody
so
down.
so I mean, this goes back into, you know, this is all, you know, this is part of who we are as a species. Like some of these things, like, but we have the ability to do it. We just have to try to, you know, suspend. And I think that's like one of the biggest challenges is, you know, how do we get above that, you know, to use the outdated reptilian brain? How do we get beyond that? I mean,
That's a great point.
yeah, I mean, it's something that, you know,
that goes to that
I want to
nature.
share a quick story on that.
That nature versus nurture kind of talk. It's like it's that innate thing that we say yes, we're going to go with this innate physiological reaction, or are we going to the whole nurture aspect? Are we going to listen to the education that we've been through? Are we going to listen to our rationale that we have? Which one are we going to follow? Are we going to think for ourselves, or are we going to react? Right?
That's a big thing, you know, reacting versus actually, you know, because the reptilian, the smaller, you know, that primitive kind of brain, it just reacts really quickly. Like, you know, when you're afraid of something, you don't know why you're afraid. You're not thinking like, why am I afraid of this thing?
You're not trying to rationalize it. It's just
like all this. It's just like, holy shit, there goes a big fucking cat. I don't want to get eaten. I'm afraid, so I'm either going to run or I'm going to climb up a tree. I'm going to do something. But fear is instantaneous. It doesn't have to be rationalized, or you don't have to go through any logical steps to justify it inside of your head. But we need to use the larger part of our brains, you know, that cerebrum cortex that is good at planning and evaluating ideas and looking at things and going through something logically and actually solving problems. If we can use that before, you know, if we can overcome using the small primitive brain with our, you know, with our new addition, this guy, then we can, you know, we can seize the day and we can win what is really, I mean, this is a battle, you know, for our entire species, essentially.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ethan. Like, how do we do that when we're faced with, you know, the broadcasting, with the media, you know, or social media? How do we do that when we have the consumption of all these chemicals that are not good for your body, are not good for the mind? How do we do that when we have these environments of opposition? As me, as a black man, on a daily basis, walking out of my door, I'm married to a white woman. And when we go to the store, they look at her and talk to her and don't even fucking talk to me. Right. You know, even though I'm paying. Right?
How do same thing to me.
I had a story when we were getting married. When we were getting married, that happened at a country club in Valencia out here.
You told me that. Yeah, you told me that, Cook.
I had to physically step in front of people and like initiate that eye contact. Like, I'm making a decision today.
The white lady at the country club in Valencia that we were looking at almost shit her pants when she saw that this was Jennifer. She's like, "Oh my God, you're Jennifer!"
Yeah. I get that a lot, Anthony. You know that from.
I know this. I've been through it.
Most people who hear me talk on the phone think I'm like some middle-aged white dude who's gone.
Math teacher.
I get it all the time, man. And they come in the office, they're like, "Wait, you're Eric?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Dude, I so thought you were like an old white dude who was divorced 3 times." And
you've lived that many lives in the life that you've been in. That's why.
But I mean, and even to get back to your point, like how do we do that when there's a constant opposition, and more so people of color? How do we do that? And especially, like, for instance, here's how fucked up this world is. My childhood. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, me and a couple of my cousins, we were walking down the street doing some kid shit. We had some limes in a tree at my dad's house, and then we were rolling them in the street and watching the cars, you know, roll over the lines because we're kids, right? Yeah. And that was a highlight at a family barbecue, all right? And so
kids fucking around doing kid shit.
Correct. And so some cops pull us over, you know, Caucasian, and you know, they say, "Hey, we get a report of vandalism, that you guys are, you know, destroying property," in which we're clearly not. And there are limes in our hands. And I don't know any building that's any piece of concrete that's going to freaking crumble if you throw a lime at it. So anyway,
it erodes over a long period of time now.
Right, they handcuff, they zip tie us, put us against the wall, bring the dog out. The dog is like snapping in our face and all this other crazy crap. And you go from that, or I go from that to, living every single day from that particular experience, and especially if somebody's saying, if I see you niggers around here again, it's going to be a different story.
This is what the cop told you.
Exactly. So.
And how old are you?
I was about 7 or 8 years old.
7 years old.
Jesus.
So going from that, right, and this is what I'll talk about, the nationalistic and the patriotism, going from that and then going to a concept, or having a concept being embedded in my mind through certain imagery and broadcasting, that it was my time to answer the call to be a patriot, right? Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, in 7th grade, I came up with the concept that I am going to go into the military. Not understanding what it's all about, not understanding what will be asked of me, not understanding where I come from in my history as African Americans and spilling so much blood on this soil, right? And it's been embedded in us that, hey, you must be a patriot. You must, answer the call for your country if you really love your country. And I carried that all the way through high school, even though I constantly came in contact with racism down in Florida. Now, here I am, 18 years old, signed in the contract, raised my right hand, said I will give everything and up to my last fucking breath for this country. Okay? And having a mother cry to me after I watched my first beheading on YouTube when it came out, unfortunately with that reporter, over and over again, watching that, and my stepfather telling me, this better not be you, better not be you. My mom crying, telling me, please don't go, do this instead. So I joined the Navy. And in time, I had this feeling like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this because this is not for me. This is not what I thought America was. This is not what I think I should be fighting for, doing some history, right, in that access. And still, at some point in my brain, I still found like some kind of logic, some kind of rationale that, Eric, you must volunteer to go over and fight. Your brothers and sisters are dying, and this is part of the cause. You got to go over there and fight. And so I volunteered. Nobody else on my ship, nobody else in my command in Pac Fleet volunteered but me. I volunteered to go over there, right? Because I wanted to see what it was all about.
When you're turbine engineer?
Say again?
This is when you're a turbine engineer?
Yeah, so I went from turbine technology to venture into security forces, which I essentially did, being deployed over there.
Right.
And so I say all that to say this, like, how could we create the capacity for an aesthetic growth and development to understand oneself and develop that consciousness to make those decisions to lead us down a better and brighter path when the damage has already been done? That is the mindfuck. Here I am. Mm-hmm. I went out, served the country, saw people die and all this other stuff. And for what? For what reason exactly?
Right. And taking lives.
And so, like, how can you re-educate yourself to get rid of that if it's so deeply ingrained in you? And it was deeply ingrained in me as a child. How can I utilize this frontal lobe, this pineal gland, this mm-hmm. This whole brain? How could I do that if the conditioning is so deep? And I had so many African American mentors who was like, brother, let me tell you about, Kunta Kinte. Let me tell you about, Africa. Let me tell you about Lukumic, tribe, because my grandmother was Cuban. A lot of people don't know that. She was Cuban, God rest her soul. And the Cuban language, or even Santeria, comes from Lukumic, comes from Africa, okay? Yeah. And so I had all these people telling me, but the manipulation and the nationalistic approach was so ingrained on me, I still made that conscious decision to go over and do this because I felt like I was doing it for this. I felt like I was doing it for the country, right? I felt like I had to do my job. It was my job. It was my calling to do so. No, it's not.
So how do you feel now after
No.
experiencing everything that you did, and now?
And and here's my point, Anthony. Good question. It's so fucked up in the game about it, right? That if they were to call me right now to go back, I'd fucking do it. I'd do it. And let me tell you why. I have a new perspective on it. I'll do it so my daughter doesn't have to do it. If that ends all the shit, I'll do it so she doesn't have to do it. I'll do it so that my unborn son doesn't have to do it. I'll do it so my little brother doesn't have to do it. I'll do it so my other brother, so no more other African Americans in my fucking family has to die in somebody else's fucking war. That's why I would.
Never meant to represent us anyway.
Exactly. That's why
We're fighting an imperialistic war to keep those in power who already enslaved us and used us to build the power. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. We are still slave minded. That's why I said this book is so powerful. Because we are still slave. We still believe that our oppressors will love us.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
it's a thing, man. Yeah.
It's very deep.
It is, and it's how do you get out of that mind frame? I want to be I don't care. I'll share it. Like I want to be a cop. I want to join, the police department here in Glendale. I do. Yeah, I feel like if I'm in the system, hopefully, if a small, like microscopic level that I can inflict some kind of change, some kind of new narrative toward human connectivity and understanding of multiculturalism, of one race, right? Of the human race, then I would fucking do it. That is my stance on that. And the kind of segue, I'm not going to share too much, but it's part of the conditioning. And here I am again, serving again, but in a different capacity, obviously. But just, Ethan, just to kind of harp on a little bit of what you were saying is, how do you do that? How can we retrain ourselves to understand this functionality of what we call America that is geared to continuously oppress us, right? And have us to do things that the most common person won't do. How do we do that?
Really don't know, man. It's a battle within yourself, and it's a battle within groups of people. I mean, you wanted to join the police department. That's great because it sounds like this is the first time we talk, but you have a sheepdog mentality, like protector. You want to make things right. You want to protect the people that you care about. And see to law and order, and see to that things are done right and done the way that they are. I think that's fantastic. I think it's awesome, amazing, seriously.
Yeah.
I'm 100% down with that. That's fucking cool. It's just the system that we're in right now we are in a fundamentally unjust system. So it kind of makes it very difficult for somebody who is seeking justice and wants to be part in building a just world to help build that up. I think that we can still do it. Obviously, I try to remain optimistic, in everything, just because I do believe in human potential. Like I said, going back to the beginning of this conversation, we're 100,000-year-old species, but we started off in the trees.
Much more than that, but
we have footprints on the moon, dude. So there's nothing that it's like Voltaire said, there's no problem that can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. It's not a thing. Right. Any problem can be solved, but it takes people working together. I think personally it'll come from a more populist kind of standpoint, or a populist politician. I, don't want to give myself away. I really supported Bernie Sanders. I thought that what he was spitting was really, it was hot shit, man. And the guy had a lot of really good ideas. And the biggest one amongst them, I think the most effective amongst them, is that we need to get rid of this whole fucking millionaire, billionaire bullshit. That concentrated wealth gives them power that
and this two-party
system away from all the rest of us. So we need to
bullshit two-party system.
Yeah, we need to topple all that shit. Get rid of all that. That's going to take That's going to take us people on the ground. We can do that.
That's what I'm saying. That's what Dave was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, bringing it completely back. Because
I
want to be talking about Dave's.
Well, okay, yeah, no, but I mean, it goes into education. Like, I mean, it goes into educating the people.
Yeah.
And if you can teach the people in a way that is not going to trigger their primitive brain to think that, you know, like, I'm under attack right now. Like Sandra was saying, you know, she's having friends that she speaks with sometimes that say, well, I don't want to be called a racist if I, you know, have this discussion on race. You know, like, I don't want to say something wrong and have it misconstrued.
Be wrong.
Yeah. That was part of Muhammad Ali's greatness, was his ability to talk about those things with white people and not make them feel like they were being attacked verbally.
Right, exactly.
Muhammad Ali was able to have those conversations because of his charisma and the way he presented the conversation.
It's easier to digest sometimes when you present it a certain way.
Right.
And that's not even really a valid excuse anyway.
But
because,
that's a good point too. That's a good point too.
You should have that conversation now instead of doing some shit that.
Yeah.
Have the conversation now instead of doing something that is going to cause more problems in the future because you didn't have that conversation earlier. Like, somebody could have stopped you from doing or saying something that's like racist for real if you would have had that conversation earlier. Like,
I think it's an invitation. It's an invitation to have a conversation because you've never had to think about race and what it means to you on a daily basis. Well, welcome to the club. Let's talk about it because it needs to be talked about.
The perfect time to talk about it.
Especially when somebody's saying they're not going to be judgmental about you. They're not going to yell at you for being racist. They're just going to be like, yo, don't do that because X, Y, Z. Like, for example, the first time I took Cindy to meet my mom, she said, what did she say? Did she say you were Oriental?
Yeah, you can't say that.
She said, yeah. And I was like, you can't say that shit. And it's not that she was trying to be, like, she wasn't saying it in a derogatory way.
Right. But that's
Cincinnati, Ohio. It's mostly just white and black people. You just didn't know.
It's about 42% Caucasian. It's like 43 or 44% Caucasian, 42% African American, and then the rest is other. So it's like not that many Hispanic people, not that many.
She was trying to be PC, but it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't see an Asian person until I went to college in Ohio, until I went to UD.
We had two, if you can remember this, Sid, Ethan, and Britt. We had two Asian people in our entire high school.
Did we?
I don't even remember.
They weren't related, no.
I was like 2 grades ahead of you.
Like, really?
And
I remember.
Man, because we didn't go to school in a really huge school or anything, but that's sad right now. I cannot remember those.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know we had one Latino person that came our senior year, and that was like it. That was it.
Raphael was.
Well, he's
Raphael was the only thing we had. And he was only
the resident Latino. Yeah, Raphael's half black. I thought he was just like black with the good hair.
That's another topic. Saying good hair.
Yeah, good hair. Another whole topic.
Yeah, the good hair.
Anyways, to focus this back towards the whole Dave Chappelle thing, in a joking manner, I need to ask this because he kept saying it. Candace Owens.
Oh my
God. You're
God.
talking about Candace Owens. So he kept advocating that her nether regions stunk. What do we think about that, Peter?
I can't speak on that. I have no idea.
I can't speak on that, but I think it's telling that
he's like, I'm done with that one.
It's telling that she actually wrote until like people were, apparently, like, I'm not on Twitter or, the other social media sites or whatever, but apparently people were talking to her on tweets and saying, like, oh, Dave Chappelle is talking about you in his comedy special. And she said, oh, I don't consider it an insult. It's like, he's like a great comedian. This is like power, for me. And it just like, it harps on and reminds me of a saying, like, some people are too stupid to insult, dude. Yeah. Like you have to be completely dense to think that you are being thrust into a position of power when somebody is hating on you and people are cheering. Like,
you can like, my issue with her is that's exactly true. And you can see it in her eyes. Like I was watching that George Floyd announcement that she did, and it's just like, it's like when you watch Mark Zuckerberg, there's like nothing behind his eyes.
Right. There's only
just like
there is only the void.
Yeah, there's the void, but she's different. It's like you can see behind her eyes that it's like
she's uncomfortable, isn't she?
Well, it's not that she's uncomfortable. It's just like there's something missing. Like I feel like she thinks she knows what she's talking about, but she really doesn't. Or she's like, it's all stats and facts with her because she hasn't had the experience to contradict it. So she's just speaking in the way that the people that want to listen to her want to be spoken to.
Well, she's using that too.
And then and this is the perfect time because she just wrote a book or whatever. But whenever somebody brings her up as like an argument, which surprisingly the people on my Facebook friends list that are like right leaning, they never prop her up because they know we'll tear her ass to pieces. Because first of all, she's just a zealot. Like she was a zealot for Democrats when she was a Democrat, and then she felt like she was lied to, and now she's a zealot for the right, which means she didn't listen to anything before when she was a Democrat until she did, and now she's doing the same thing on the right.
Right.
Like she's just the pendulum swings hard with her, and it's just gonna swing hard either way she's going. Yeah. So I don't really give her much credence or anything, and plus she is the smartest idiot that I've ever seen. Like she's the most researched idiot that I know.
It is crazy. Like she does have
no. I mean, and the thing with her is once the right is done with her, they're just going to treat her like they treat the rest of us. So not worried about it. She'll get it eventually when she says something that doesn't resonate with them, and they just kick her to the curb.
Right.
Same thing they did with Tommy Lahren.
Tommy who?
Tommy Lahren, she's like the small white blonde Bill O'Reilly. She just yells about shit.
Oh yeah.
I like that's why everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. yeah.
It's a shame because I mean, Candace Owens, I feel like she has a pretty impressive, at least as far as I remember, she has a pretty impressive. And I guess this just goes to show that it doesn't really, formal schooling doesn't mean shit. Because I mean, I think her academic pedigree is pretty solid, but she just really says some really stupid things. I mean,
just like, book smart.
I heard.
I honestly think it's like what Britt, you've been talking about this a couple times in this conversation. Capitalist. She could be considered somebody that maybe is a black capitalist. Like
absolutely, 100%.
What do I have to say to get paid? And
she's like the AOC lady, that crazy woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, all these people are, like, what they're thinking to themselves. What do I have to say to get paid?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the problem.
How can I protect it? How can I protect my investment?
Right.
Yeah. Rachel Dozer. She's like
Dolezal.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was just impressive, to be honest. I thought she was black. I thought she was just light skinned.
Yeah. Everybody
had me fooled.
She did. She
had me fooled.
She did.
That's why.
There was a girl who went to college with Brit that was pretty spot on. I'm forgetting her name. It's like the embodiment of another version of her.
And look, I hear this. I watch a lot of Joe Rogan, and he has a diverse set of guests and whatnot, and they always talk about these really in-depth issues. And he usually has a lot of times this doctor. I forget her name, but she's super smart. She's a doctor, and she knows pretty much everything about nutrition. And almost every time she's on the show, he brings this up, and he's like, if you teach a really smart person the wrong thing, they're going to be really good at doing the wrong thing. They're going to do the wrong thing very well. And that's kind of how I feel about Candace Owens.
That's spot on.
Yeah.
That hit with weight, dude.
Yeah.
That's
so enough with Candace Owens.
My thoughts exactly.
This is a really important topic I need to talk about. This is something I really want to hear all your opinions on. What the fuck was up with his shirt?
Oh my God, the shirt and the pants.
Straight up see his nip. And his dad bod was out of fucking control. Which reminds me of a quote. Which reminds me of a quote from one of the first movies he was in, where Eddie Murphy said it in Nutty Professor. You comedians take the comedy a little too far, and he was talking about his shit locks.
Oh yeah.
What the fuck was up with that goddamn shirt?
I spent about probably the first minute that I spent looking at that shirt.
I'm saying, I was like, what are you doing? And the whole outfit in general.
Yeah, I got to realize it's Dave Chappelle.
Yeah,
whatever the fuck you want.
And he's a genius, and he was fucking good.
And it's a testament to that is how we spent like the first few minutes looking at that shirt,
analyzing the shirt,
and then the rest of that whole special just like deeply tuned into what he was saying.
Shirt.
Yeah, did notice that.
He's a dad to teenagers, man. He's allowed to have a big ass style, just like
it looked like he was wearing a big ass onesie. That outfit was terrible.
The gut was hanging out. I'm like, man, did you just get swole? Did you go from skinny Dave to swole Dave, and now you're dad bod Dave?
Hey, you see it happen right after he got them Netflix checks. That's what happened.
Hey, I guess he's eating good.
That's what happened.
He's eating real good.
He's still keeping it real, so I'm not hating on him, man.
Yeah, man. All right, next topic. Do we think Americans put too much stock into celebrities? Going back to that whole point.
Yeah,
absolutely. 100%. Why does anybody care? I mean, celebrities are people, but what? Unless you're like, propping up something that's really important and you're doing a lot of work. Like LeBron's building schools and shit in Ohio. That's newsworthy.
Yeah.
I've never been a big fan of LeBron himself, but I have some personal. I don't know. I think he's relatively arrogant a little bit, but he's meted all expectations.
I mean, the dude is.
He's really fucking good. And it's a mentality that you kind of have to build.
Right.
I guess, to meet those expectations. Right?
He's backed up his arrogance. But
he's backed up his arrogance. I think he's grown. And I like his show on HBO, The Barbershop. I think it's really positive. I really dig all the stuff he's doing in the media. I don't know. I can't connect with him as a player for some reason. I don't know.
See, that's what needs to happen. Like, he's using his platform for good.
Yeah,
like
right.
The show,
I support all the shit he's doing.
Scholarships and all that stuff.
Yes.
But otherwise, why the hell should we care what celebrities have to say? Like, if you're doing stuff for the community that you're also speaking about,
right?
Boom.
By all means.
But the good thing about that is he's the blueprint for the next generation of young athletes or entertainers who get that type of platform to how to really use it. He's been the first one to really use it in this magnitude. So you got to give him a lot of credit. No other athlete has used their platform in this, in that type of way. I mean, he's influencing a lot, and he's not backing down. He's not Michael Jordan at being quiet for a check.
Right.
Not at all.
He was doing something quite
he was.
He's doing this stuff. Yeah, that's true. Say that again, Jen.
He's doing what Jordan and Kobe wouldn't do.
Right.
Kobe, Jordan could give two shits about giving back to the community as long as they was buying the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
He should have been helping.
Black capitalists.
Back when Rodney King got his ass beat around the corner from my grandmother's house. He should have been doing something.
By the way, we're 2 miles away from where Rodney King got his ass beat. Right now, we're sitting in our apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, Jen, I want you to speak on this. What happened to the police officer, one of the police officers that beat Rodney King's ass? He got promoted and then put in another district.
Oh yeah, we went to school with his daughter. He got promoted to something in the sheriff's department, some shit, I think. I don't remember. I mean,
well, that's part of the systematic racism too, just in terms of what the police were. The initial development of a police was not to police a white society.
It was a slave catcher.
Yes, what we call the police. Their initial job was to return us back to the owners when we escaped. So now they make sure we stay in our neighborhood. It's the same thing. They police us to stay where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And anytime we venture into an affluent or more white community, what you doing over here? Then you start getting harassed. We know you ain't from over here. Get back to where you're from.
So, if Eric, you can make any change, man, I love you for trying to do that, man. That's true.
Yeah.
We do. I mean,
like that's an Yeah.
And you
Taking
picking
all
out
that
of the
system
neighborhood
from
over
the
there.
inside is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking it on from the inside is definitely key.
Speaking of police, nobody talks about Bass Reeves. That's an
Cool.
African American who fucking fought opposition. I mean, he pretty much he arrested white cops. He arrested white officials who, you know, committing acts of heinous acts of violence or injustice. I think he had something like over 3,500 arrests with only 6 resulting in kills. You know,
Way back in the day, wasn't it?
and they were all in self-defense.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't talk about, you know, African Americans in law enforcement in that capacity. I mean,
Right.
he was a major, you know, a major representation of how powerful, you know, the African American community can be, and nobody talks about him.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause that would
Just
give
that
you-
unity that we don't have, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know what, said you know what?
Which I want to plug HBO's Watchmen when you said Bass Reeves.
Yes. But said you're right. You know what's crazy? Like, I hear a lot of people. I'm very quiet until you get me to talking, but I hear a lot of people, you know, argue about, you know, the Black Lives Matter and other stuff like that. And you know, I can't help but feel a certain type of way when I walk down the street and I say, "Hey, what's up?" to another African American or Black African,
Yeah.
whatever, and they don't say shit to me, or they look at me like,
bruh.
"Sorry."
Yeah.
Right,
Oh my
because
God.
I'm not wearing baggy jeans, because I don't have gold teeth, because I don't have that. You don't know me. I've
Mhm.
been there, done that. Why the fuck would I keep doing that? Because that is not me. That is not what being black is all about.
Mhm.
Okay, that is a fashion
Yeah.
statement. Great, but that is not African American culture.
That's
all
a
right,
great point, man.
and
That goes back to
hate
Ethan's point about that using more of your mind. Like a lot of
Yeah.
our people have not got out of the hood. They have not
Yeah.
been able to see the world and travel. They all they know. Like I have students who live in Cincinnati and never been to a Bengals game. Like you live downtown, you know, they don't get to.
Yeah.
Their minds are open. You know, they're still trapped mentally. All they know is the neighborhood. All they know is the gang. All they know is the negativity being taught to them in their environment, and that's what they express.
Out of sight, out of mind.
I go home. I tell you guys this. I don't mind sharing it. I really don't give a shit. I go home to Florida, and some of my friends are just like, you know, people I grew up with in the community are like, oh, you know, you're one of those white boys now. You're not black. You know, you don't look or talk like us. You're not black. Why? Because I'm articulate. Why? Because I don't have that Southern twang anymore as I used to. Because I don't use Ebonics with some other person told me that that's my language. Because I don't use that crap. Why? Because I carry myself in a different way, in a different manner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm respectful, whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
And for some reason, they think that washes the culture out of us.
right.
Like,
And you know what? It's like that movie, The Green Book, right? Green Book.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not white enough, and I'm not black enough. I'm not Latin enough because only my grandmother's from Cuba, right? When I go back to Miami. So where the fuck do I fit in? How do I connect with all parties, or even just my African American brothers and sisters, if I'm not even accepted? And I think that's also a different conversation that needs to be had.
I think
Minority within a minority.
I think identity is a huge conversation that needs to keep coming up. And you know, I truly believe, you know, we're more than just this too. You know,
Absolutely, of course,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, I think we should. Yes, there's people say, oh, you can't say you don't see color or whatever.
that's bullshit.
But I think we need to realize, like, or think about, even contemplate on a different level of consciousness, maybe through meditation. I don't fucking know. I'm not like all that spiritual and stuff. But you know, and understand, like, who the fuck told you were white? Who the fuck told you you were black?
That's why I want to continue these conversations.
You know what I mean? I think we need to understand that we're just people, and this is just one life of probably multiple lives that we have lived, and we just have to all figure this out together. There is no right person. Even if you say, all right, this person's, you know, background is extensive, they have, you know, 3 PhDs and whatever the fuck, and they have, you know, their top secret clearance is above the president of the United States, doesn't mean they're fucking right. Doesn't mean everything they do or they shit gold. doesn't mean that. Just means that they're good at something that led them down that path, as said, said,
Well,
and
they
I
got a lot of
think
money.
they have a lot of money. And you know what? And that's also a good concept too. We don't talk about, cultural capital. That is a lot of that is definitely missing within education, is how powerful the color of your skin can be, right? If we're going to talk about color, we don't talk about cultural capital. We don't take it
Or
with us.
how powerful your dollar is.
Or your dollar.
Or the African American dollar, or the whatever group of people group together and say we're gonna spend here, right? How quick? Perfect example. How quickly did fucking Starbucks fucking flip that goddamn switch?
Some T-shirts
when they're like, we're gonna stand on this whole thing and against Black Lives Matter. And then Black people stopped protesting. Their fucking sales went zero.
I know, because I saw my stocks go.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they
like, ooh, rewind.
They turn heel real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that is I think the primary concept is that in terms of education is you have to understand how valuable you are as a person before you can understand an economical value of a dollar, and how you as that person, being a particular cultural capital, can capitalize on that dollar and make it not work just for you, but for the community. And I think, through education, if we had those particular concepts in place, or those modalities, fluctuating throughout, inner city communities, or, low income communities, then I think we would see a systematic change, based upon whatever the population of that community is. It may not be within the next 5 to 10 years. It could be within the next, decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, but there will be a change. Yeah. And it starts from there, in my honest opinion.
For sure. So I want to continue going down my list here of different topics and everything like that. So speaking of celebrities, putting too much stock in celebrities, for my millennials and Gen Z and all of that, what do we think of how much influence we give influencers?
They're useless.
Oh my God. Well, the one thing I will say, to go kind of back to your original question about, how much stock are we putting in celebrities making a statement, what I like to see, and what I have been seeing, is a lot of people calling out, I guess, like, they had good intention, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Kind of like when COVID first kind of broke out, they had the celebrity "Let's All Sing Imagine" together, and people were like, this isn't helping. And then you had, what was the other thing that recently occurred? Oh, the I am white and I am acknowledging my privilege. I am responsible. I hold accountability. And everyone was just kind of going through going, great, I'm happy for you. Now donate money. You have the money. Please donate so it can actually go to a good cause. So at the very least, there seems to be a little bit of a...
That's touching on my next topic that I want to go through.
Oh, okay. Well.
Yeah. But I want to talk this one out.
The influencers.
They're doing the most. Did you see that they were trying to show solidarity by doing blackface?
Oh my God! Yeah, I saw that. That was weird. Oh.
No. Why should we have to tell you not to do that? When has it ever worked?
Right.
When has it ever worked?
I missed that one.
That's why I said
no. They were like doing blackface makeup, like I stand with you, like just say you stand with us. Don't put black makeup on your face.
Like some people would do like half, or like
fuck. Like, tell your followers or whatever to go to black-owned businesses. Like, why the fuck aren't you doing that? Which with some of my influencer friends have done that.
Yeah.
Right?
I
want to defend. Not all influencers are fucking.
Correct.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, but a lot of them are doing the most, trying to get those extra follows.
A friend of mine, I went protesting yesterday, and a friend of mine, Jahan, he's doing on Friday a Juneteenth march. So, you know what I mean? And he's an influencer and stuff like that. And I feel like, you know, he's on the right side doing the things that he should be, because he's, you know, all his followers are going to go to that, and it's going to be, you know, educational. He's bringing out, you know, part of Juneteenth was red fruits, right? Where to celebrate Juneteenth, they, you know, African Americans, when they were celebrating it, would eat different red fruits, and that's kind of like where the whole watermelon, you know,
stereotype
kind of comes from. Yeah,
I don't know.
Celebrated, you know, for Juneteenth and everything like that. And I didn't know that, and he was telling me about that when I was talking to him during the march.
I don't know about that, but I think the level of influencers, I think if they have access and they have, you know, connections, they should connect with their community leaders, right? If you're an influencer and you have a following of people, connect with your community leaders who are you know, activists or whatever, or advocates, and bring them out to these protests or rallies, or have conversations and put them up on your page. You know, we talk about information. What better form of disseminating information is as an influencer on your social media that people scroll through. It's the fucking dopamine. They already have it going through their mind, their brain.
They're already clicking and ooh.
Yeah, exactly. So throw out the information out there, but about Tariq Eben Zaid. Throw out the information about the Moorish community. Throw out the information about the Black Wall Street. Throw out the information, you know, about you know, whether it be reform or whatever. Put it all out there. You know, if you're gonna use your status, you want more followers, right? Especially in whatever community that you're targeting in. Put that information out there.
Yeah, Lamorne Morris is another influencer friend of mine. Which, you know, Eric and I have worked with, as well as said. He was also putting out a link to all the Black-owned businesses in Los Angeles. So he was doing, you know, there are some influencers that are using their, you know, podium.
No one doubts it. Yeah, it's just at the same time, you know, we've seen the other ugly the ugly end of the spectrum, where you have the one influencer who runs out and she's like, let me grab a drill and pretend like I'm taking a photo of me putting the city back together so I can post it, and then jump into my Benz and run away. So it's a little bit, and they certainly get a bad rap.
Let's see if he comes back on.
So I mean, obviously not all influencers do that, but when you have the I guess the culture of look at me, watch what I do, watch what I eat, watch what I wear, you know, it's very easy to target them as being so self-centered. Obviously not all are.
Yeah, but it's I think it's tough to depend on them to do the hard work. Like it's about, you know, getting that quick photo op and, you know, getting the most new followers out of it, the most engagement out of it. But the real legwork is, like you said, getting involved in the communities. Like that's just not one day worth of work. And if it doesn't have an ROI for some of the influencers, they probably just aren't going to do it. Or they're going to do that exact thing. They're going to get that photo op and then they're going to skirt off. So I think influencers, the ones that want to make a difference, they need to put in the legwork. You know, it needs to be more than a day. It needs to be a commitment to something that's going to make a change.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next topic of pandering and profitizing versus actual protesting.
YG.
So one instance, and I like YG. I listen to a lot of his music, but YG shot a music video during the massive protest last weekend in LA, for example. So when I was protesting as well, you know, I saw some mostly white dudes out there with like full red camera packages, fucking build out monitors, fucking shooting raw, you know. recording the protest, and you know, for me, you know, because I thought about bringing my camera out and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, this is important footage to get. But I didn't do it, and my gut was really telling me, hey, you know, is this pandering? Is this potentially finding a way to exploit? This cause, which is like the exact opposite of what this whole thing should be, the intention behind what protesting should be about.
That's the exact issue. Like, you had that thought, but then you paused and you took that second level of like you were introspective about it. But some people just like, oh, this is an opportunity, I'm gonna go get it. I'm gonna go get some film on this so I can use it for my own personal gain. Mm-hmm. But like, you were about to go out there and take some footage, but then you took a second step back and like, you were empathetic about everything that was actually going on. Yeah. And in Los Angeles, short supply of that. You know, we're in a media first.
I probably lost
culture over here.
I probably lost a number of opportunities in my career in the film industry because of that too. Because I check myself and I constantly listen to that voice of reason.
Yeah. Because if not, like, that's the reason. That's the reason why neural network exists, is to be above that. You know, you could fall in with everybody else and just be part of the problem of how the media sees minorities across the world. Like, I ran into that with my wife's parents, like, because they just weren't exposed to people like me. So the only exposure is what they saw in the media, and they weren't having it.
Right.
And I get it.
And you had to win them over. But,
yeah.
But they listened, and they opened their hearts, they opened their mind, and they, you know, and they were older too. So you can't tell me that people can't change.
Yeah, can't. No. They love me now.
Exactly.
But it's just like, people don't
push you to kids.
Yeah. Which is
and then baby's coming.
Yeah. Have grandkids. Stop telling me that. It's very uncomfortable for me. For you to tell me to have
very uncomfortable.
It's weird. That's weird for me.
They got like Puerto Rican.
But yeah, it's just like, that's we need more content like this. Like, everybody's out to just keep the status quo. All these movies, you keep seeing the same thing. You know, white people being cast in minority roles when there are plenty of minority actors out there, and they keep giving this same excuse, like, this person's a big draw. But then they make this movie like, what, Crazy Rich Asians. There weren't any huge names in that movie, but it was a bomb-ass movie, and it did really well.
Because people are sick of seeing the same regurgitated bullshit. That's why. They want to see people. I really feel that people want to be cultures. There's a lot of people that want to be culture. They want to see new stories. They want to see new content. Right? Again, that's why we're working together with the neural network. And, you know, Eric and I have a show too that's coming out. It's a workplace military recruiting workplace comedy.
Oh yeah, I saw clips of that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, predominantly African American cast, and it's just like a workplace comedy. You know, it just, these people are just working there, and it's not like we're flashing it and showing it or anything like that. It just is what it is.
Right. But yeah, that concept is more of like just kind of showing like the humanity in regards to the military, more specifically. And to show like exactly what it is. It's not like I guess the concept being, or the narrative being pushed out is like, we're just robots, you know, and we're just completing simple tasks or whatever. But this show kind of I want to show, you know, how we kind of integrate, how we become so close within just 2 weeks of knowing each other. You know, we create that circumstance, that environment, because we know the society that we're in that particular world won't do it for us. So we have to figure out a way to come together to complete whatever mission, if it's to fight opposition or if it's to, you know, make sure that, I don't know, the ship is still seaworthy. How do we do that with all of our, you know, cultural backgrounds and differences? And we find a way. And that is pretty much the whole objective behind that TV show, obviously to entertain because there's a lot of bullshit going on in there. But
yeah, and it's
it's and it's just kind of show that these things are possible. Like as you said, people can change, and there's no better environment, I don't think, in my honest opinion, than the military that shows a huge range of change. There is some racism in the military for sure, but I'll tell you what. The moment those fucking bullets start coming down range, the moment there's a fire, the moment, yes, people fucking, that racism and all that other bullshit goes straight out the fucking window.
Yep.
And let me tell you, I've become so close to so many people and closer than my own brothers, okay, that they know more about me than my own mother does. And it's because of those environments. And unfortunately, and it's unfortunate that it has to be those environments to where we kind of see each other as equals, right? And there is more inclusion in the environments. It's unfortunate, however, and it's my belief as well that I hate to say this, that if America continues down this path, that will be the circumstances that kind of corrals us together to be there for each other and build this country for what it should be, as the standard for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, I guess.
Well, that's like the temporary situation that happened after 9/11. Like temporarily, we were a united front against a common enemy, but slowly went back to the status quo.
Yeah.
And then I actually saw somebody post about that exact thing yesterday. They were like, it was around, police officers. It's got pictures of police officers and firemen. Like, who were the ones pulling people out of the buildings? Who were the ones that were the first responders? Like, yeah, they were cops. But again, this was at a time where everybody had a common enemy. And slowly as time goes on, the military is taking care of that common enemy. So now things just go back to the way they were. So yes, I'm sure everybody that was there was extremely grateful that the police and the firemen were there assisting and pulling people out of buildings, but that doesn't excuse the abuse and stuff that happens afterwards. It just doesn't equate.
Yeah. You know what? Very interesting. When I got back, this is at we took a military flight and then a commercial flight because there are certain protocols you have to take, and I think I flew into Baltimore. I believe, Baltimore. And when we got there, for some odd reasons, I guess these people knew we were going to fly in. And instead of saying, like, thank you, it was more of, so you guys are fighting this war, you're killing people, you're destroying people, blowing up people's babies and all this other stuff. Okay, well, where the fuck were you? Where the fuck were you? What were you doing? We are out here dying for you, but you won't support us. Why?
Right.
If they were to call your son, would you say the same thing? If there was a draft, would you say the same thing to your son? Would you tell your son to go to jail and not serve his country, or your daughter? No, you probably would not. These are the same people who are like, where's our military? Who's going to take care of this? More specifically 9/11, and they were great supporters. And there was great supporters of the military, and there was a unification, as you said. But after some time, after they saw the realization of war, the realization of what happens, when you create this, an enemy or consolidate, on a common enemy, they slowly backed out, and they were just like, hey, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. But you guys, when Bush came up there and says, we shall not falter and we shall not fail, everybody cheered, and it was just this massive unification.
That's how he got reelected off that speech.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to support the military,
which he didn't write, by the way. It was Cheney who wrote that, but whatever.
Right. Well, he said it, but it's whatever. Cheney was pulling the
oh, absolutely.
Oh, so it's
it's going to happen, and we're seeing that right now. We're seeing people who are like, these looters and all of this stuff, and there's other elements like Antifa and all that other stuff. But if you really think about it, this is the least of what can potentially happen. if a business is destroyed, which has insurance or which can be rebuilt, I would take that than a church with 100-something people burning inside of it. Okay.
Or somebody coming into a church
and shooting up the
and then praying with those people and then killing them all after they open their hearts to him.
Right. I would take that. I would take that over the looting, and I would take the looting over all of that other stuff. Okay. And I think people don't really realize that, it's going to take a bloodbath for people to really come together, come to terms and say, hey, look, we should change things. There should be equality.
Which is scary. It's
fucked up.
Scary.
It's fucked up and terrifying that there might be a civil war within our own country, and that to really.
If they keep going the way they're going, like defunding, like we did this already. We did this in different countries. I'm not going to say whatever, but we did this already. You defund the police. You dismantle the police department. And these fucking gangsters or whatever come out of the woodworks, and they're going to want to, hey, we got all full range. There's no holds bar, no rules. I'm going to tell you, that's when the people who know what this is and who wears this, right? And this is typically given to people who've gone to combat, right? And so they're going to come out, and if it's going to be a no holds bar, it's going to fucking destroy the city.
It's going to be really ugly too, and really gruesome.
It's going to be fucking bad. It's going to be a nasty time for America.
Which is why I don't understand the rhetoric about defunding the police. Like, it's not about
restructuring. I think is important.
Yeah, it's restructuring. It's restructuring. It's training. It's not defunding. Like, or I don't know.
We have too many people out here with, like, there are more guns on the streets than there are Americans in the homes.
Yeah.
In this country. So
I don't think defunding the police is gonna. It's not gonna have the desire to.
You can't do it, man. It's impossible. There has to be a law and order buffer, dude, between, they call it that thin blue line. That thing is, it's real. Right now, it's fucked up. There's a lot of fucked up parts of it and elements of it, but that shit does protect the innocent people from people who are just wanting to be out here fucking wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan, you made it. That's a solid point, because if we do that, you won't be able to tell who's innocent, who's not. It's just like being over there in the Middle East, they're all bad guys until they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that is a common, theme, and that's a common mentality, because you don't know who the fuck is who. And so if you don't have a certain department or police to kind of control that and make the determination based upon training who's who, then you're going to have a lot of fucking dead people in the streets who didn't do anything and didn't know shit about fuck.
Sorry, so Eric, so you certainly feel like the rhetoric when it comes to defunding the police and moving resources into other areas like education, has it gone too far at this point in your opinion? Are we moving into a dangerous territory where you're explaining a scenario where we don't have we're taking away the one, how can I put this? The police brutality is a thing, but at the same time, if we completely do what people are asking, which is to defund and take those resources away, that we could be opening up ourselves into a more dangerous situation.
You're awakening a sleeping giant, to be honest.
So that's basically okay.
For sure, and I think yes, we can obviously for sure reallocate funds absolutely into education. And that education can also involve the police department for retraining.
Yes. Retraining. I think that training is one of the big things.
In my honest opinion, they should move them away from local government if there's such a huge issue, and if the people have an issue with them being underneath local government, put them underneath federal, hold them to a higher standard. And then they'll kind of, their training cycles will probably coexist with the same as the military. We constantly train, constantly.
But that goes into restructuring, and I think that's what we really need to do.
Exactly. And that's how we know when to shoot and when not to shoot. If it's coming past me and it's like 20 feet away, they're not shooting at me. They're just shooting because they're scared. They're not trying to kill me.
Reacting.
Exactly. Now, if it's a snag, that means they're trying to kill me. And then I will return fire. There's rules of engagement. My problem is with the police department, and which I think is lacking, is the rules of engagement. You have all these standards that you're taught. You know, you have your soft skills, your verbal jujitsu. You have your hard skills. You go from, you know, your hand to hand to, you have your OC spray. You have your baton. You have your taser, your X26, or I think they changed the model. And then if your life is in danger or somebody else is in danger without reasonable doubt, then that's when use of deadly force is authorized, essentially.
Right.
And so I think the problem is a lot of times we skip these steps, right, to subdue or deter a threat. I think we skip also the humility portion of it in terms of the police department. And I think it is my belief that if we go back to the retraining and say, look, you know, in these particular scenarios, this is what you can do. More specifically for this Rashad Bird, I think his last name, instead of tricking, you know, your perp or whatever, and saying like, hey, we just want to make sure that you're still be able to function to drive home, when he's already, you know, confessed that he's intoxicated, right? And then also try to trick him and taking a test that will prove that he's committing a crime, right? Because you didn't see him commit a crime. You just know that there was an intent, quite possibly. Instead of doing that, why don't you show a little compassion and say, hey, look, here's a bottle of water. I want to see you drink this water right now.
They have quotas. That's the thing. They have quotas.
Yeah. Lock up your car, and, you know, you say take your
ass home. Give him a fucking ride home. Yeah.
Courtesy turnover, or if he wants to walk, well, it can be potentially dangerous if you give him a ride home. Okay, I understand that.
So
but if
call an Uber. Be like, hey man.
Yeah. Or if he's willing to walk
especially
home,
now in 2020.
Walk.
Yeah.
Follow him home. Make sure he gets in the door. One thing that we used to do in military police is, like, you know, if there's a courtesy turnover, which you do for free, if they can't drive home or whatever they've been drinking, you know, we give them a ride home or whatnot. Or, you know, where do you live? Or I live down here. Okay, call the taxi, call the Uber, we follow behind. And then, you know, you watch them go inside their apartment. All right, before you go to bed, before you lock this door, if we cannot gain entry into your unit, into your house, I want to see you drink some water right now. All right, you drink water in front of them or whatever to kind of, you know, hey, look, make sure you get some fluids inside of you. And then they say, okay, don't leave the house. If we catch you out there again, we're going to arrest you. And then you close your door and you're done for the night.
Yeah.
But none of that stuff is happening. And that's what I mean by humility.
Yeah.
You know, you got to treat everybody fairness. It's a video I saw a young lady made, and it was so powerful, about a cop who was talking to his son about hanging out with another African-American kid. I don't know if you guys saw this video kind of circulating. Mm-hmm. And basically what happens is the cop is like, look, I don't want you going out there and hanging out with this, let's just call him Eddie, the black kid. And the kid goes, why is it okay for him to come over to my house, but I can't go hang out with him? And then the cop says, well, because I want to keep you safe. And so the kid waits till his dad goes on the night shift, and he goes out anyway. The dad reports to a robbery that just happened, and basically he sees suspects on the corner, and then he stops to question them, you know. And here goes with the racism or the stereotype. He goes, you guys robbed that store over there in the corner? And they say, no. You guys got any felonies, any warrants out for your arrest? They said no. And they tell him, like, to get the fuck out of there or whatever. So the cop, you know, ultimately tells them to leave, go home, put the joint out, whatever. He sees 3 kids wearing hoodies, and he automatically starts to engage and run after them after they pull off to the left. Now, these are kids, and they see the cop, you know, has his hand on the gun. So they take off, and they're scared. Kids are running. He chases them. Long story short, he chases them into a parking lot. They're hiding behind a dumpster, waiting for him to leave so they can, you know, come out and go home. So they take off. The cop turns around and automatically and draws his pistol and fires, I believe, 3 rounds. The last kid goes down. He handcuffs the kid. He has his knee in his back. He's telling the residents to get back in their house. And they're like, hey man, you just killed that kid. He didn't have a gun or anything. He was like, this is none of your business. Get out of here. And the black kid comes over, Eddie, and he says something like Mr. Carlson or something. And he looks up at him, and then he starts to think. Flips the kid over, and it's his fucking son. The moral of the story is, to treat African Americans or anybody else or any kid or any other person like it's your son, like it's your brother, like it's, your daughter, like it's your nephew. Because he just drew his weapon and he just fired because he saw them running. And he just assumed that they committed a crime. And that message was so fucking powerful. And I was like, that is the utmost truth. You have to have humility in this job. Even in the military, doing everything that we do, we have to have humility. We cannot just engage somebody because we just suspected that they are doing something. More often than not, we catch these people, and we question them and we ask them where they're going, a series of questions. And depending on the answer, we choose to either keep track on them or we just let them go. But we don't just engage unnecessarily because they're inside that particular environment where we have caught, perpetrators, or we've caught violators or people committing heinous acts of violence. And I think that is the most important training that these cops need to have. And that's why I believe they should be under federal governance because it's a higher standard. And I think they just really need to understand that we're all people just trying to figure out this life and need to be treated as such.
That's a really
solid,
really powerful point. Like, I have a buddy actually who's a paramedic, but he's also he was in law enforcement before too. And he said, the thing that's funny about being a paramedic is that I had to take a national registry exam that is across the board, all across the country, that verifies my skill. I can go in any state in the union, and every other paramedic that I work with knows exactly what I know. We all know the same stuff. So if they say, we need to do an IO on this guy, I know what that means and I know how to do it. You're boom, you got it already. But he said the problem with police departments is that each city, each state has its own criteria on what it wants its officers to know and how they want, how they want them to do this thing, policing, enforcing the law. So you have all these different standards that kind of go up and down and up and down. There's differences here and there. I think that idea, Eric, that you have for a federal police department that would be huge, because it would eliminate a lot of that variation. It would weed out a hell of a lot of people that really shouldn't be doing the job, but just do it just because they're able to get a job in their little, rinky-dink community, and like they were able to figure out how to pass the physical and, how to pass the psychological battery, and they know somebody in the department they were able to get in. Good for them, right? But, those people end up becoming problems, and that problem spreads like a cancer. So, like, I mean, not only you have that, the standardized training, the continued training, which, I feel like a lot of them, like those guys that kill Rayshard, like, I mean, he didn't have to. I mean, how are you two people when you can't subdue one person? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
Eric, you've literally had to do that.
Like, I mean, I have a book behind me that has a bunch of techniques you can use. It's one person to put somebody on the ground and keep them there.
Yes.
And they will stay. Like, and you don't have to do anything that's like going to hurt the person at all. Look, there's a reason that the Japanese Metro Police train judo. Koreans do the same thing. It's because the shit works. It works, dude. It works. And it's actually, and I mean, you can actually take down a person and you don't have to maim them or kill them, but you can put them down and they're going to stay down.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to put handcuffs on them and then put them into the back of a car, and then it's over. But
isn't standard training for some of these departments in Krav Maga, which is meant to hurt you real bad.
That's a military
hurt you bad.
For like,
we train that.
And disarm. Yeah.
Ethan, you're absolutely right. I lived in Japan for 6.5 years, and I only seen like maybe a station chief or something like that who carries around like a revolver or maybe like a stick or something to that effect. But most Japanese police just carry a baton, and some of the traffic police carry like this staff, like like Goku on Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball.
Whatever. Right, but like, and it's laced with some kind of chalk or some kind of substance, and they throw it at the back of your car, right, to bust that back window if you run a traffic light or if you scurry off from them or whatever. But these guys are fucking legit. They have my utmost respect.
That's all they need, son.
They are pretty freaking awesome. And you know what? And it's illegal for Japan, for Japanese citizens to own any kind of firearms anyway.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the crime rate, they solve 97% of their murders, which is few far in between. Jeez. They solve 89% of the statistics are still the same from 2019. They solve 89% or 87% of their robberies, which is nowhere near the United States. I think we're at like 12%.
Oh my God, what are we at? Like 16%?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, and it's you're right. It depends on the system, and they're all cross-trained on every platform. They know exactly if you're in Kanagawa prefecture or if you're in whatever prefecture, they know the training elements that you go through, and they all have the same standardized training. And I think you're absolutely right. That's the issue, because you have local governments. They're like, okay, we're going to train because we work in the wilderness. We're going to train like this because we work in Montana or we work in Kansas, or this is a plantation state, so we're going to work and operate in this regard, right? And I think you're absolutely right. If we have that standardized training amongst the entire department, then I think it'll mitigate some of these unfortunate circumstances or events that we see today. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Sorry to interrupt, but I gotta bounce.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
But it was this was great. Can't wait till we do the next one.
Absolutely.
Next week. This is week by week. Next
All right,
week.
yeah, let's do it.
You get the other one edited. Oh, God. The thing is, these are 3 hours, so I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what exactly.
Hey man, just pull a Rogan, just put it up on the podcast.
I guess
people love long form content.
I think I'm about to do that.
Very little editing needed, except for like the video plugs that you're gonna do.
Yeah, but for sure, definitely put it in the podcast.
This one feels better than last week. Said before you go, I want to grab this last statement.
Mm-hmm.
This is for all my Ohio people in here. John Crawford being shot in Walmart in Beaver Creek. Timothy Thomas in Cincinnati in 2001. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about those names? What do you remember about those times?
I remember who shot Timothy Thomas, Officer Roach. And I remember that started those riots in 2001.
Which
I remember
you participated in and got shot by a revolver.
Yeah, I got hit with a beanbag.
Yeah.
So and I also remember
in high school when this happened. So this is a high school kid, got shot. Roach said he had something shiny on him, shot him, and his book bag full of books spilled out onto the pavement.
Mm-hmm.
Just murdered him. No just cause. Nothing. Literally nothing. He had a hoodie on, a green hoodie on.
And the worst part of that was my most memorable thing from that is that he got reassigned to the Blue Ash Police.
Yeah.
And then there was a girl at our school, I forget who it was, that got pulled over with him or by him. And she had to not be in school for a week because she was afraid she was going to get killed. And I don't remember who it was.
I remember this happening. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's my most visceral memory from that whole thing. And I just think that's just indicative of what happens. And like the guy that got shot in Walmart, like I was listening to something about it last week, and literally it's this thing where they keep saying that they're fearing for their lives, but the police officer said, he either said freeze or drop the gun or police or whatever. He said that one thing, and then 1 second later, he started shooting.
All right.
Like, you don't even have time to process that. If you're in fear and you're trying to process something, you need more than 1 second.
You even know he's being talked to. He's in fucking Walmart in a public place.
I thought he had earbuds in too, didn't he?
Probably.
I don't remember. It's just.
But dude, even if all right, let's say you didn't have the earbuds, it's still like you can't just like ask somebody to like what behavior do you want to see when you see somebody when you say freeze Like, what behavior do you want them to do? You want them to put their hands up? Do you want them to stop doing what they're doing? If their hands are in front of them and you're behind them and their hands are in front of them, like, do you want them to keep their hands in front of them, or do you want to see their hands? What do you want? What do you want? What do I have to do to get out of that situation alive?
And that's part of the
situation.
Right?
That's part of that training and retraining and that we were talking about earlier. Like, we're humans and we have fear. Everybody's afraid of something, but with training over time, you'll be able to manage that fear more effectively. And then in those situations, you won't be so reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the goal is to be able to, be in those situations with police officers and not have to worry that they're so scared they're going to kill you.
Right.
Because you're both scared already.
Right.
But as a police officer, I would want that training.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just like if I was participating in a combat sport, I would want to be able to have the training to do my job effectively.
Yeah. Like
right? And the
boxers
boxers
who can keep their eyes open when they're getting hit in the face. That happens over time.
And counterpunch. That takes a lot of conditioning. It takes a lot of training to get there.
Can I say the first time I saw that, I was like, this person's not human. You're no longer human.
Yeah.
Who gets hit in the face and just is just looking at you like this, sizing you up for the next punch.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head, and I think also the thing is, especially with that gentleman, I think he worked for UPS or something like that. I'm sorry, exterminator, some kind of pest control, who had the pellet gun. And the officer came out with his M4, by the way, which is kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
And
the guy in the hotel.
Right. And
Yeah.
then told him to get down on the ground, face down, put his arms out. Okay. You can see from there, someone can surmise whether or not he has, tactical advantage over you. He does not. You have your rifle, you have your M4, you have your sidearm, you have OC spray, you have your baton, you have your taser. He does not. He is combat ineffective at that particular time.
Right.
You do not see a visible weapon. You already have control of the scene, and I think that's what's lacking is for them to understand. For some officers to understand, you already have positive control over the scene. Mm-hmm. That particular threat is already afraid of you, and they're assessing whether or not you're going to, either come in as a combative to them, or you're there to assess the situation and figure out what's actually happening, and which that officer obviously did not, and it's a lack of training. For me, being in the military, if I tell somebody to get down on the ground, I'm already on top of them. That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not going to be slow to approach unless I see something protruding that may display something like a bomb or something of that particular nature. Then of course I'm going to be cautious in my approach, and I'm going to have EOD on the scene. Mm-hmm. But if I already have reports and that this particular person may have a rifle, and I have a rifle, and I know I'm more highly trained than this particular individual, and I have a team behind me, I'm not going to sit there and give out these silly little stupid orders and tell this person I'm going to kill you if you get something wrong. Mm-hmm. In that environment, that particular person, that threat, if or perp, is scared shitless. Okay, and they're going to react in that regard. So if somebody tells me I'm going to kill you if you get the next answer wrong, what am I supposed to fucking do? Because I may not know the correct answer. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, again, it all goes back down to training. And that individual should have went through their escalation of force. They should have been on top of that perp. If your hands are in front of you and your feet are crossed and you put them closer to the small of your back, I'm on top of you. That's it. You can't do anything else because I see everything visibly. You don't have any kind of weapon that's visible that can hurt me until I find something otherwise on you. Other than that, I have control of the scene. I have all the power. Right. So it just all boils down to training and saying, like, you see something shiny. It could be a belt. It could be keys.
What is belt?
Cell phone.
It was
Yeah,
his
it was his belt.
Okay, well, no, I'm not familiar with this case. Okay, but
Yeah.
yeah,
This is like a historical Cincinnati case. It caused riots back in 2001. So
The city was similar to what it is now. There was a curfew, but there was militarized vehicles on the streets.
Yep. Same thing.
National Guard was on the streets, and people were arrested for being out past 8 p.m. But
they were doing the same thing. They were macing everybody. They were shooting everybody with rubber bullets,
it was turned up a little bit more. I mean, there was there was black people literally just because they saw a white person dragging them out of the car and beating the fuck out of them.
Oh wow,
tensions were high.
Tensions were very high.
Yeah. Yeah, it just goes back to that training and hopefully my journey getting into the police department. You know, to be honest, this is just a stepping stone. I
want to document this too. I want to be there with you, and I want to show people that this is a powerful thing that you're doing, and change can happen from within if people have the courage to do it.
Absolutely, and I don't have to. I mean, I've already laid my life down on the line. I mean, I could have died 1,000 different ways already, and that's not a problem for me. And I don't mind going in there and ruffling some feathers. I've done that.
No, you don't. Yeah. I've seen you do that. Ruffle feathers. And, you're good at that. No, you're good. When you know you got a knack for something, you gotta do it. You gotta do it.
I don't mind. You can call me out on my shit. I'll definitely fucking call you out on yours. I'll do my research to the T. And I'm interested to see in this journey because I saw some discrepancies already and just qualifying for the department or even just above that, and and not to discredit anybody who does qualify, but it's just the lack of training I saw or initiative to train. It doesn't kind of shed high hopes for the department, and I think they really kind of need to look at that and analyze that and find people who are willing to consistently train. And that should be the attraction, because that's what the military does in all of their freaking movies and videos, is showing these people consistently going through training and how hard it is.
And the medical field and a lot of other fields that are dealing with lives,
Absolutely. And I think that's an importance, and it's not just about governing people or being a liaison between, the law and civilian society. It's also about being an advocate, for the people. It's also about being that buffer zone, that thin red line, as Ethan said, for the people and the laws and the Constitution. And I think where the disconnect is I think through training, they think that they are the law and, they can just inflict damage, amongst the people at will. And I don't think that is a positive narrative. And if that narrative is something that rings true in the police department, which I hope it is not, we're going to see a different thing on the streets in the near future here. And it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be good.
No.
100%. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think I'm going to end it there. The last question I had, let me see. Oh, okay.
Bless you.
They said bless you.
Are we getting lost in the sauce in America? Are we getting overwhelmed by stimulus? Right? This constant, it's hard to keep up with. I hate to say this, it's hard to keep up with all the police brutality because it's happening so much. You're getting so overwhelmed. What does that do to our psychology?
Dude,
at a certain point, it stops being anecdotal.
And that too.
Yeah.
You can stop saying like, this isn't just an outlier. Something, this warrants a further look. And I think that this situation, and a lot of people are getting woken up right now, because, we talk about George Floyd, but that was like the spark that, kind of blew up.
Catalyst is a catalyst. He's not a hero. He's not a savior, people. He is a catalyst.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying any of it, but but we have a lot of people talking about a lot of other instances of police misconduct in this country right now.
Buffalo. So when you say that, the elderly gentleman that got pushed in Buffalo is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Because there was an officer that tried to pick him up, and he got pushed by another officer. And when that officer got fired, all of the people in that precinct or in that unit quit.
Yeah, they went on strike or whatever.
And went on strike.
Oh, they signed. They put in their resignations.
They put in their resignation.
57 or 58 of them, almost
yes,
60.
They all quit and celebrated when they did that.
Did you guys also notice? I saw that clip. The officer got pulled off of him, and nobody bent down to help him until the military people got to that part of the line. Yeah, the National Guard person was the first one to bend down and actually check on this dude.
Mm-hmm. He was bleeding out of his ears.
That's a very interesting thing you just brought up, Seth. I know you have to go, but really quickly, I think also a segment or element that's lacking is that as a police officer, and Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong or right, you are a first responder.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You are in charge of that detainee, that perp, that individual. And if you OC spray them, you have to render aid to them until the paramedics arrive or an EMT arrives to take over and render aid to that particular individual, to that patient. Same thing is a shooting. I see a lot of officers who engage and then they detain and then search the victim or the combatant, but they don't render aid because they're like, just let them bleed out. No, they're not a terrorist, okay? They're just a byproduct of a fucked up system. So render aid to them. If people preach about, well, jail is all about reintegration, if that's the truth, then render aid to that particular threat or that suspect or whatever, and then put them back inside the justice system.
Verbiage. You said threat. That's the thing. That's where their minds keep going, and that's what we have to change. Is everybody's a goddamn threat. Everybody's a threat. Everybody's a threat, and I'm not diminishing, right?
The stress and the danger that a lot of officers go through. I'm not diminishing that.
It is tough.
At all, right? It's very tough, right? But
everybody's not a threat.
Everybody's a goddamn threat. And the problem is everybody, a lot of the officers that are making these mistakes, the white officers, they're conditioned to think that, people of color are a threat.
Well, see, I'll push back on one part of that last sentence. It's not just the white officers. It's all of them.
That's true. That's true.
It's training. It's at the training level. And then I do see conflict there because, there's even a book about this, Black and Blue. Is that the book that you were telling me about?
That's the book. Yeah, that's the author we're going to have on next week.
So there's conflict in this. And then even I saw sprinkles of it even with the National Guard. Some of the National Guard guys, people of color, you could see it on their faces.
Of course.
That they're like, this is my job, but this is crushing me on the inside.
Yeah.
But then there are also those officers, even the officers of color, who are they're terrorizing people. They're abusing their power on people of color because you hear clips every once in a while of whoever their superiors are, pretty much telling them that when you're patrolling this neighborhood or this neighborhood that's mostly filled with people of color, you got to act and walk and move a certain way because this neighborhood is more dangerous.
Right.
And
so that they have that instilled in their mind.
It's instilled in them not only as whatever their culture or their color is, but as a police officer, which is extremely unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I am like a firm believer that if something doesn't happen at this level, when you see all these videos and accounts of minorities being killed, and that's another thing. People always bring up the statistics about how many minorities are actually being killed, the exact number, but that's not the only thing. Like, being killed as a minority by cops just because you're a minority or because you don't get the benefit of the doubt like everybody else is one thing. But what about all the people that are wrongly imprisoned or falsely accused of stuff? Mm-hmm. Like that also needs to be factored into these statistics. Mm-hmm. Because an abuse on this small level, if it is constantly being excused, it's going to rise to a higher level where everybody's a victim, and then all of a sudden everybody cares. But they don't. Not everybody doesn't care right now. Like it doesn't affect everybody, so those people that it doesn't affect don't care right now. But it's the same thing. There's a quote about the Holocaust. They came for my neighbor, and
Out of sight, out of
I said
mind.
nothing, and yeah, and then they came for me. So it's people are going to abuse power, and if you don't like nip it in the bud at a lower level, it's just going to get out of control.
I do want to add
That's
a
what I
little.
think about it.
Go ahead, Sandra. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, so I do want to go back to the gentleman in Buffalo because I was helping out with some research into police unions, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that strike that initially, again, had to lower my standards. I thought that they were leaving because of the fact that they were in disagreement over the treatment of that gentleman, and instead they were leaving because the union would not back them. So this was something that was from Mayor Byron Brown. And you can find this. It's Stephanie Rule on MSNBC. I can certainly, I sent Anthony that link, but the 57 officers resigned from emergency response team under the threat of the Police Benevolent Association because the union threatened dues paying members of the union that if they continued to perform their duties under, as members of the unit, that they would not get the support of the police union. And there's a lot of talk about how police unions will oftentimes protect those officers who need to be removed, and in this case kind of the opposite happened where the union straight up said to them, we're not supporting you in this if you continue, and therefore they decided, all 57, that they were going to go on strike, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I really do want to talk more about that in depth once we have Michael Brox, correct? Brox.
Yeah, Brox.
About his feelings on unions.
That's crazy because that's, again, the media twisting it in a different way.
For sure.
The left-leaning outlets are saying they quit because of the reason that we all thought initially before you actually brought up that article.
Yeah,
which is why it's so hard to trust this stuff.
Oh, you thought that they had that they had quit because they felt like
the articles that I read were they quit because that officer that pushed him got disciplined.
Yeah.
But that's
why I thought they quit too.
That's what
Yeah.
See, this goes right.
Well, technically that still goes into line, though. I mean, they did quit, but because he got disciplined, but because they knew that the union was not going to support it. So therefore, all 57 backed out. But the argument is usually that, but doesn't the union often protect police officers, when they're meant to be reprimanded? So.
Yeah.
That's exactly why, Anthony, I told you, like, I don't really say anything until I have all the information, because again, the news they always twist and turn things to create a certain narrative.
I learned my lesson there as well. It's just like why you don't update your phone on the first update. Something's always broken. Wait for that 0.2, 0.3.
Yeah, I that's how I do car models too. I usually, if it's the same car model within like a 3-year period, I always buy the one at the end.
Hey, the world works a certain way. Like these rules apply.
Yeah. You know what? And that's another thing we have to understand too. Even on the Zoom calls and stuff like that, the world operates in a different capacity and in a certain way. And there is a specific agenda out there. And me and Anthony kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Yeah, I sent you some articles on that.
Doesn't want to, but there are a particular set of rules that have been outlined, and there are lines drawn in the sand. And I think, as Ethan said, it's up to the American people, or just people in general on a global perspective, is to wake up to these particular initiatives, and to really understand where we are as a human race and where we need to go in order to live as one collective conscience, and kind of get away from the racism, the segregation, based upon color and based upon, status quo and all this other crap. The moment we start to really understand that and get rid of those particular individuals who hold that particular platform and power, that's when we would kind of be able to create a foundation that we can grow up out of. And yeah, we have to understand what those elements are, and it's about just being informed, about having the information.
Yeah.
And share it with Anthony, and he can share it with whoever he wants to. Sure. But just the information that's out there and the narrative that's already in place, that's what needs to be broken down. It's not really the police. Yeah. It's not really like even your
the establishment of everything.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than Black Lives Matter. It's a lot bigger than, All Lives Matter. It's about an initiative that has been in place for a very long time that needs to be dismantled and destroyed.
United Corporations of America, right? Basically. So many words without getting too deep with it.
It's yeah.
Pretty much the establishments, right? But
yeah. We could go down that rabbit hole in another conversation.
Yeah, it might be another whole
That's another 4 hours.
Yeah, for sure. I want to thank all my guests. Brig got kicked off, fucking Spectrum.
There's some solid intel that coincides with Sandra, the history lesson that we got from Sandra, and then also from Brett. Is his name Brett or Britt? Sorry,
Britt. Like Brittany, but without the
got it. Yeah. There's some intel out there that that will shock and awe you, and it'll bring a different thought process.
For sure.
Shock and awe is a light way to put it. We'll definitely lose a night's sleep after having that conversation.
Maybe. All right. But that's a whole nother topic. We'll get on later on.
For sure.
We'll have that conversation first thing in the morning so you can forget it by the time you go to bed.
Yeah. It's a different
whole situation. But I want to thank my guests for coming on. For another genuine conversation.